Okay, we're going to call to order our first hearing of the evening. This is the application of 552 Adams Street LLC with an address at 552 Adams Street, seeking a renewal of an existing special permit, which is number 2350, which was issued on July 26, 2012. The applicant is not only requesting that the special permit be reissued, but that the 5-year permit limitation be done away with and the special permit be made permanent. This property lies in a Residence B zone. My name is John Leonard. I'm Chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me this evening is, to my immediate left, is Board Member Jeffrey Mullen, and to my immediate right, Board Member Ted Daber. The rules of the board are such as we're going to hear from the applicant. We'll hear from people who wish to ask questions of the applicant. We'll hear from people who wish to speak in support of the special permit application or who wish to speak in opposition to the permit application. We're tape recording the proceedings this evening, and the tape recording is the official record of the proceedings, so that would ask that before anyone speaks, tell us your name and address, speak up nice and clear and loud so we can have an accurate tape recording of this hearing if we have to revert to the tape in order to write a decision. As evidence for this hearing, at least the first portion of the evidence, we have the application for special permit. It's dated May 2nd, 2017, and it's filed by Attorney Daniel Brennan as agent for Starbucks. We have a series of plans by Allen and Major Associates. They're dated 6/1/2012. They show the parking lot, Franklin Street, the building, the interior of the building, of the Starbucks premises, I should be more exact, excuse me. So we'll have those documents as evidence at the hearing. So without further ado, Mr. Brennan, welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you.
We're delighted to hear from you.
My name is Daniel Brennan. I handle permits and licenses for Starbucks. Address is 50 Holt Road, Andover, Mass.
50 Holt Road.
Holt.
H-O-L-T.
Correct.
Very interesting. I used to have a client who resided on Holt Road.
In Andover?
Yes.
Near Phillips, right?
Yes. No, Restucia.
What's that?
Restucia.
Oh.
Does that ring a bell?
No, it doesn't.
Okay, good. So you're not conflicted out. I just know it's a nice neighborhood.
Yeah.
Why don't you continue with your presentation?
Yeah, so it's just an existing Starbucks coffee shop with the patio seating. We renovated it back in 2014, and that's actually, I believe, when we renewed the special permit, but we were 2 years late on the renewal, so I believe it was backdated to 2012. The store was...
Effective as of.
Yeah.
Yes, non pro tunc.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the store opened in 2001 originally for the special permit, and that's when the board put the condition every 5 years we meet and renew the special permit. When we renewed it in 2014, there was a residential abutter that requested that we added a wood fence around the parking lot so the headlights wouldn't shine into their property, and that was
I
done.
remember that. Wasn't that a retired priest by the name of O'Leary?
No, it was a young couple. They had just moved to Milton. They just bought
Doctor,
the
I
house.
think.
No, it was
Female
a-
doctor who,
Oh, I don't know
I
if,
think she, yeah,
Was she?
who was one of them, yeah, I
Okay.
believe, yeah.
so
And so you did that.
we did that. We haven't heard of any complaints that I know of, so that's why we were hoping that we could get a permanent approvals so that we wouldn't have to come back.
Okay. Did you have an opportunity to talk with any of the abutters?
I did
and
not,
to-
no.
To see whether they assent to your special permit or not?
I did not, no.
Okay. We advertised this in the newspaper 3 or 4 weeks ago. Did you receive any comments or suggestions from neighbors?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Do you have anything else you'd like to add in support of your special permit?
No, nothing in particular, just we've been there for 16 years, haven't had any problems. They requested the wood fence, and we were happy to do it. So I think we're a good neighbor.
Okay, generally speaking, without getting overly specific, has the business gone well?
Yeah.
So it's a successful operation?
Yep.
And you have patio furniture out front and all of
Yep,
that?
yep, we got 21 seats inside and 24 outside. Same as always.
Great. Let me see if my colleagues have any questions. Mr. David, do you have any questions of Mr.
I
Brennan?
just answered, excuse my first one, or part of it anyway, as to whether since 2014, the last time you were here, I guess,
Yeah.
whether any changes had been made to the, either the capacity or the exterior, other than the addition of the fence that was...
Right. Nope, it was renovated in 2014, so typically they get renovated like every 5 to 10 years, so nothing's
And the
changed.
parking is the same?
Yep, yep. I think the landlord's actually preparing to restripe the parking lot. He's trying to figure out the right time. I had a brief conversation with him about that, just to redo the lines and stuff.
Okay. I don't have any questions at this
Do we
time.
have the special permit?
Yeah, it should be in
Yeah,
there.
Mary sent it to us, I think.
And how do we know where the spaces are?
Well, there must be,
Now, I see the plan, but the plan's got 34 spaces.
Yeah,
There are 34 spaces?
yeah, I believe so, and there's 13 that are delineated to Starbucks use. Because there's a whole parking lot behind the...
No, I know the property, but I don't know what that means. Does that mean that people who are shopping in Starbucks are the only people who can use the 13 spaces, and then everybody
No,
else can use the
no,
balance?
it's a shared parking lot, but when I looked at the original decision, it said that the 13 spaces were adequate for Starbucks use, so that's what the original decision had said in 2001.
and you agreed with that, didn't you?
Yes.
I'm just trying to understand what we have here. Are we being asked to say that this 34-stall parking lot is adequate for Starbucks,
No,
but that they have to maintain a minimum of 13 for their exclusive use?
Well, I don't think they're for their exclusive use. They have, are there signs in your parking lot that
No,
that
that's
indicate
a,
Starbucks parking lot?
no, I believe it's just an office that's with us, our landlord, actually, an accountant, so I don't think there's much other parking needs.
So there's not much commercial use for the
Right.
parking lot. Most of it
Yeah.
is the Starbucks customers going in and out.
Yeah.
And there's, without getting overly technical and precise, is a large part of your business, particularly in the mornings, is it the grab-and-go business, so to speak?
Yeah.
People will pull into the parking lot, run
Yeah,
in, grab
that's
a
it.
coffee, grab a muffin, jump in the car and drive away.
Sure, yeah, there's only 21 seats, so,
Right, so
yeah,
only the regulars come and
yeah.
stay,
Hang out,
hang
set
out
up
with their
shop.
computers. Okay. And has there been any complaints to you, Mr. Brennan, or to the proprietor of the premises that
Nope.
the parking's inadequate in any way?
Nope.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mullen, I took away some
No,
of your
that's fine, you're the chair. I mean,
Number 3 on the
I see that, yeah.
conditions,
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
So at all material times, Starbucks customers shall have access to the 34 regular and 2 handicapped spaces reflected on the plan on file with the board, which is the plan that we've been provided with. What is the significance of the 13?
I'm not completely sure, but it happened in 2001, when the board originally,
Yeah.
so I don't know if the parking lot at some point changed from when the store...
Well, let me ask you
originally-
this, if, putting the 13 aside, are you representing that Starbucks customers do have access to the 34
Yeah.
regular and 2 handicap?
Oh, yeah,
So this is what I would call the Starbucks parking lot then,
okay,
but shared with other people.
yeah.
And who else has the ability to use this lot?
I believe, I know there's an accountant that's in the building, but I'm not sure. There's like parking underneath. You see how the building goes over the parking lot
Oh,
there?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Is that a sole accountant? It's not an accounting firm. It's just a sole
I think
proprietor?
it's an accountant firm. It's our landlord, Louis
Falcone.
Falcone. Yeah, him,
Okay.
his office.
His office, do you know how many people, roughly speaking, he has in that office?
I don't. It's not very big, though. I would say maybe like 4.
Just for his business enterprises
Yeah.
in the square?
Yeah.
Well, the,
Have there been any times that the even during the busy season, let's say pre-Christmas time, where the 34-space parking lot has been inadequate?
Not that I've been aware of. I think it's pretty good-sized parking lot for our size store, as far as what I usually see.
What, do you know the gross square footage of the store?
It's just over, it's plus or minus 1,200 square feet.
1,200.
Yeah. I mean, typically, it's it's either 1 or 3 seats per parking spot in most towns, so.
Yeah. Mr. Mullen, do you want to continue with your questioning, or have you given up?
No, I'm not giving up. Now that I think the question is not so much about the 13. What you're asking for is a renewal of this 2012 special permit, right?
Yeah,
Which is,
Exactly.
which really speaks to the 34.
right.
There's really no mention
Yeah, I
of
didn't
13.
Right,
Yeah.
I guess I
Mentioned
shouldn't.
16 in one of the earlier ones.
Or is it 16?
So it's 16 regular spaces in the 2001,
Yeah.
4 compact parking spaces, and 1 handicap parking space. That was in the 2001.
Okay.
And then in 2012, it's 34.
Yeah. I think we should be clear on that, right? About what it is that it feels to me like they're asking for a renewal of the special permit, which is time limited. I believe it's time limited, right?
It is, it's limited to 5 years.
Right. And I feel like with respect to, with respect to that, I think this is worth continuing to look at. I understand the request, but I feel like parking in East Milton Square is always a jump ball. And, while it may be adequate today, I think that's fine. I think it's hard to predict what the future of the square is, and I don't think it's a bad idea to have this looked at from time to time. I mean, I'm happy to talk about that, but particularly where the petitioner isn't making a capital investment in reliance on this, and we're seeking, if this were a first-time investment where you were saying, I really don't want to come back to you because I'm making a large investment and I need to have the parking secure, but I don't know. I think the square is really a tricky situation with parking in general, so I'd like to just register that point in terms of the 5 years. Can I ask if, and maybe John asked this, is the general sense that it's working well?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we haven't had any problems.
No further questions?
Okay, do you have anything more you'd like to add to your presentation?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Is there anybody present this evening who either has any questions of Mr. Brennan or otherwise wishes to speak in support of his application for the renewal of the special permit? And there's no such person present. Let me see if there's anybody present this evening who wishes to speak in opposition to this application to renew the special permit. There's no such person present, so unless my colleagues have any further questions, we're going to, Mr. Brennan, you have nothing further to add?
Nope.
Okay, so we're going to end the evidence portion of this hearing here and now, and we're going to consider this application in open session as we have to under the open meeting law, and we're going to vote on this application for renewal after our deliberations. So, Mr. Mullen, do you want to be
So I
there
think the
first?
notice of the hearing coupled with the fact that everybody in town knows Starbucks and knows the property and the lack of controversy regarding the matter, I think supports the extension of the special permit, but I would propose that it continue to be limited by time as has been the board's custom, and would support the extension of the current permit under the same conditions as were imposed in this June 13th, 2012 decision.
Mr. Deba, please.
Yeah, I also noted the
July 26th, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I wrote June 13th.
the paragraph in here, too, that I'll just mention for the record, that says the owner of the premises voluntarily offered at the public hearing to make excess parking available to the public at large for short-term East Milton retail parking, so long as this public use of the parking lot did not substantially interfere with his tenant's use of his commercial building and parking lot. The board appreciates the owner's continuation of this thoughtful offer.
Do you know whether that offer is still outstanding?
Yeah, it should be.
I actually think it's in effect. I think that's what happens.
Yeah.
Well, I think it is. I think
Yeah.
if you took a map of the square,
I have
The
one on my
Falcone-
iPad if you'd like to look at it.
no, that's all right. The Falcones in their various entities seem to own most of the square, and they own most of the parking in the square, so they have great control over the commercial parking in the square during daytimes and also during after operating hours. What time does Starbucks close in the?
10.
They're open that late?
That's what I have written down,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, Ted, you want to
No,
continue?
so that was the, yeah, I mean, I can see both sides.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, the Starbucks, I guess, has been there since 2012, and other than the
2001.
2000 is what I meant. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Did I say 2012?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. No, I meant 2000. Sorry about that. And, other than the question about the fence in 2014, there really haven't been any complaints. On the other hand, I also see Jeff's, concern about East Milton and the parking there, and maybe if the parking for the other excess retail parking, so-called, gets too excessive or something, that something may have to be tweaked in it or something. So I'm not opposed, the other members are, to having it run out for 5 years again. If that's, did you say 5 years? Yeah.
Okay, well, look, I agree with both my colleagues. I first of all would like to say that I think Starbucks has been a terrific addition to the square.
Yeah, I agree.
They've been there for a
absolutely.
long period of time. The square is being revitalized, and I think the Starbucks facility there was part of the catalyst of the revitalization of the square. And to our knowledge, in 12 to 14 years, we've never had a complaint from anybody regarding the operation of Starbucks. So I certainly think that there's no opposition to this application, and there's everything in favor of the application. I agree with Jeff, even though the Falcones have tremendous ownership of parking lots and interests in business in the square. The square is undergoing a lot of planning. There have been a lot of articles about the traffic patterns in the square and studies on it. So I tend to think we should be erring on the side of caution, though I think there's really very little to worry about. So I intend to vote for this application to extend the special permit for another 5 years and subject to renewal at that time. So all those in favor of granting or extending the special permit, renewing the special permit, it's technically, with the condition that it has to be renewed after a 5-year period, and with the other conditions that are contained in the July 26, 2012 special permit, which we understand is still valid and applicable. Please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So, Mr. Brennan, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Appreciate
Nice
it.
presentation, and we'll get this out as soon as we can.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
You want me to do it?
Sure.
Or do you want me to do another one?
No,
Who's the appellate lawyer?
What's that?
Ted's the appellate lawyer.
That is the appellate lawyer. Okay, I'll do this one. I'll say that because I've got 5 decisions to write on a telecommunications application that I've really got to get done, so
Would you, okay.
I'll do this.
You sure? Okay. All right.
That's fine. That'll make my life easier.
Okay.
What number did you call me on? Is that your cell phone? Oh, so now I have it. It might come in handy. That might come in handy. Cybercrime. I'll haunt you. Got my number, 6 Fieldstone Lane.
I didn't give you a private number.
Nothing's private, John.
And you're right. That is for sure. We all set? Are people for the, oh, Marion, you are there. I was stalling a little bit. I didn't see you. You were tucked in behind somebody.
Yes, if you'd like.
Whatever, sure, come on up. I'll be doing some preliminaries while you people get settled.
Thank you.
We're going to call to order our second hearing of the evening. This is the 7:45 hearing. It's on the application of 61 Sheldon LLC and Edward O'Driscoll, dated May 10th, 2017, seeking a special permit or a special exception, or alternatively for a variance from the Milton zoning bylaw. In essence, the applicants propose to build a single-family home on parcel 15B, which is adjacent to lot 51, which is at 61 Sheldon Street in Milton. The land has been common ownership for a long period of time, and there's an existing residence at lot 51. Both parcels have substantially more land area than are required, but because they're older lots, have some frontage deficiencies, which Mrs. McGettrick will get involved in, so I won't go there. My name is John Leonard. I'm Chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me this evening, to my immediate right is Board Member Ted Daber. To my immediate left is Board Member Jeffrey Mullen. The rules are going to be the same as for the first hearing. We'll hear from the applicant, people who have questions of the applicant, people who wish to speak in support of the application, and people who wish to speak in opposition, if any. As evidence at the start of the hearing, we'll have the application. It's dated May 10th, 2017. We have the denial letter dated May 8th, 2017 by Mr. Prondak. We have, as usual, a very detailed letter from Attorney Marion McGettrick of 10 Crown Street in Milton, representing the applicants, describing in 5 pages with a lot of historical charts and documents, as well as looks like architectural renderings, at least computerized architectural renderings of the proposed building, which shall allow, which Mrs. McGettrick will get involved in. I don't have to get involved, as well as some, I guess, as existing site plans of and maps showing Sheldon Street, the location, the size of the lots, and all of that, which may be pertinent to this application. So, Mrs. McGettrick, I think, welcome back to the Board of Appeals. It's good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Delighted to hear from you.
It's great to be here. I'm here representing the applicant, Edward O'Driscoll, Eddie Driscoll, who is on my right, and
Welcome.
his construction manager, who is Andy Strauss, on my left.
Hi, Mr. Strauss. Nice to see you.
This is actually, hopefully will be a 2-lot site. There is an existing house, and there's been renovation taking place at the house. So the work has been going on at this site for some time. So we're coming here tonight to see if the board will approve a separate lot at 61 Sheldon Street. I have, as you indicated, submitted a fairly detailed letter, but I'm going to give you the highlights, and I certainly can provide more detail if you want.
Thank you.
This is an old lot, 1903. The house was constructed So it's a Victorian and has been there under the same ownership until Mr. O'Driscoll bought the lot last year. So it's a very unusual lot in Milton because the house has remained pretty much the same on this double lot for all this time, and it's only now that a new owner is coming in and now is looking at the possibility of using the second lot. This is one of those sites in Milton where it's one of these areas, and you see them all over Milton, where the original subdivision plans filed pre-1900 were for very small lots, 4,000 to 5,000 square feet lots, and I think I gave you a copy of an early recorded subdivision plan of that nature. All of the lots coming up to this lot on Sheldon Street were of this type, and over the years, some have remained as single lots, some have been combined as double lots, but what is significant is that there are no lots on Sheldon Street, double or single, that will be quite as large as each of these two lots, if you will decide to consider them as two separate lots and improve them that way. These lots are larger. They're rectangular, they're narrow, so they don't have really wide frontages, but they extend much further back than the other lots in the street, and that's why they're different in size. If you go into Quincy and you examine the Quincy lots, and I apologize for only having one copy, but I made a list of all of the lot sizes on Sheldon Street and the lot sizes as you begin in Quincy and the frontages where they were available, and I also gave you the GIS maps because I think these are helpful for you to just see what I'm explaining to you, which is that these lots are, even as two lots, this site is going to have will have a larger lot area than other lots on this street. What we're applying under a section of the bylaw, 6A6, which has several what I'd call exceptions to the merger doctrine. The merger doctrine says that ordinarily, if two lots are in common ownership, at the time the zoning bylaws were adopted in the town, they merge, and they're no longer separate lots. But if one of the lots has a house on it, Milton has created an exception in that case. The second lot usually remains as a separate lot. Milton's zoning bylaw, however, has somewhat unusual language in that it doesn't just, it creates a narrower exception because it says the second vacant lot has to be both non-conforming in area and non-conforming in frontage to be a grandfathered lot. And this lot, the second lot, is not non-conforming in area. So it doesn't fall under the exception in our bylaw. But there's another part of 6A6 that creates a further possible exception, and an applicant is allowed to apply for a special permit under that section, 6A6. And what that section says, that if the area has generally been developed with lots smaller or the same than the lot that we're seeking this protection for, then the board can, in its discretion, grant a special permit and allow the lot to be developed. And what you need to look at in order to see if this exception applies is what the lots are like on Sheldon Street and on Sheldon Street in Quincy as well as Milton, to see whether the surrounding area is typically like the two lots that we're trying to create here, or whether we're somehow creating a lot that doesn't fit in. The usual standards for a special permit would apply in this case, which means that there has to be an argument that there's no substantial detriment to the neighborhood. And so for that reason, I have given you concept plans for the house that would be built on the second lot. And my argument, or our argument, is that this is a very suitable design for a house next to a Victorian in an older neighborhood. It fits, it's approximately the same footprint as the existing house next to it. It even has a front porch. I would describe it as sort of a simple farmhouse-style two-story house. And if you drive around Milton, I happen to live in the area of Milton that's on the other side of town, around Houston Ave, and some of those streets, they're the same thing, small lots. There are old Victorians. Most of the lots have been developed, and occasionally a small lot has been developed recently. And to my view, the most attractive of these new developments have been the lots that are developed with this style house, because it looks a little bit like an older house, even though it's new. It doesn't stand out, it doesn't stick out, it blends in nicely. So we think at least that it's a pleasing design, it's architecturally consistent with what's already in the neighborhood. Some of the Quincy houses are actually quite small, they're capes, so they're not the same, but they don't look bad, compared to this house, or this house doesn't look bad compared to them. Across the street, on the other side of Sheldon Street, all of the lots are very small, and there's a variety of architectural styles. The second issue that I want to bring to your attention is the location of this part of Sheldon Street, because it is only one street away from the Southeast Expressway. And as you know, the houses that actually face the expressway on the next street have a difficult situation because it's very noisy and not highly attractive as a residential area, although we still have people living there and still have people buying houses there. But unlike some other neighborhoods in Milton where you might have a double lot and a Victorian, where it would make eminent sense to keep the double lot because of the extremely high value that you'd achieve with a large lot and a large Victorian, here it's questionable that you could achieve full value because there is that, and not to say it's a bad neighborhood, it's a great neighborhood and it's relatively quiet, but there is a negative to the fact that it's so close to the expressway. So it's my view, at least, that this is the best use for these two lots, to actually develop the second lot with a house, as long as it's consistent with other houses in the neighborhood and will be, attractive and will improve the neighborhood and not detract from the value of nearby houses. I haven't personally spoken with the neighbors. I know that Mr. O'Driscoll has. If the board would permit, I would ask him to just talk a little bit about the fact that neighbors are both, I don't know who should talk about it because you've been working at the other house, but you might want to address that a little bit.
Yeah, I've been working in the
Where do you live, Mr. O'Driscoll?
26 Townsend Avenue, Braintree. And
What was the name of the street again?
Townsend
Townsend?
Townsend.
Ave.
Two separate words, towns, then end,
No,
or is it one?
It's one.
One word.
Okay, Townsend.
And it is in the application.
Pardon me? Like the act?
Townsend.
Yes.
Welcome to the Board of Appeals. Delighted to hear from you. Great.
So I have been working in Sheldon Street for a couple of years now. I done a two-family with a friend at 50 Sheldon Street a couple of years ago, and I came across this house because I worked for the woman that owned it for years, and that's how I acquired the house in the end. And for the last couple of years, anyone I met in the street were always very, very nice to me, and while I was doing this project, anyone I stopped and talked to, neighbours, told them exactly what I was doing, brought them in, showed them the plans, and everyone's been extremely nice and extremely supportive. And so, it was my design of the house. I picked the style house. I told the architect, this is the house I think should go there on the lot. I told him what to design, how to design it, what size to make it, and this is what we ended up with.
Okay, and so nobody expressed any opposition to your development of the lot? Is that true?
I think so, yeah. Like, no one actually personally to me, anyone that, these neighbours, the neighbours on the right are very, very supportive, and this is a woman that will be looking directly across the road from the house, and she's been very supportive too, And
Great.
after that.
May I add?
Yes.
And I don't know if you need my name, but
Yes.
I'm Andy Strauss, and I live in Boston on Mass Ave, 173 Mass Ave. So,
Good, welcome to the Board of Appeals.
thank you, I appreciate that. We've been working with Marion throughout this, as she is really familiar with Milton and kind of the rules and regulations of Milton, and she certainly encouraged us from the beginning to go out and reach out to all the neighbors, each and every one of them along the street, and encouraged Eddie to do so during work, before work, after work, and as people pass by. And I think he's been very motivated to do that in anticipation of this hearing, and I think he's done that, and I think he can confidently say that he's spoken to everyone on the street, I think. at
Well,
one
I wouldn't
point or
say, I
another,
wouldn't
just
say,
about
I wouldn't say everybody on the
almost
street,
everyone,
but
yeah.
there's a lot of people from far, because when construction's going on, people get nosy, I guess, so they come and see, and I've been speaking to as many people as I could.
Oh, maybe they have an interest in perhaps purchasing the house.
I wish.
Maybe you'll find out sooner rather than later. Mrs. McGettrick, thank you very, very much. Mrs. McGettrick, do you have anything further you want to add?
We do have a set of full-size drawings, which if you would like, we can leave with you, or if you're satisfied with what you have and it's clear, that's entirely up to the board whether they want to keep these in the file. I would just say briefly, I think the appropriate avenue for this application is the special permit, but if the board doesn't agree, I would also argue that there is some reason to be able to justify a variance. One reason being simply that as it happens, the way the lots were drawn and recorded, both of these lots, the lot with a house on it was part of the earlier small subdivisions. The lot next door was a different subdivision plan for two lots, I think, or possibly three. But all of the land originally belonged to the Granite Railway Company, which is the historical owner of much of the land in this area of Milton. And it just happens that the lots were not drawn exactly the same way because they were created at different times, but all around the turn of the around 1900, so a long, long time ago. They've been sitting here all these years. Most people would think when they look at these plans and they look at the description in the deed, which is for two separate lots with two separate linear descriptions and two separate plan references, recorded plan references, would assume that they had a buildable lot. But it happens because of the way our bylaw is written, they don't. So I feel that that circumstance and the fact that the lots are different from other lots in the neighborhood, and adequately, more than adequately large compared to other lots that also have houses of these dimensions, would provide some justification if you decided that a variance were the proper route.
Great, thank you very much. Let me see if my colleagues have any questions. Mr. Mullen, do you have any questions?
So the second lot, the lot, this is 10,609 square feet?
Yes, the vacant lot is.
How does that square with lot 51 on the 1896 plan? Lot 50, 94,
These
96.
it's,
Is it the same lot?
no. Well, no, one lot, I have to look at the plans. I found this very confusing when I first looked at it.
So I see lot 51, that's the improved property, 8408, 50 feet of frontage. There's a building on that, right?
Yes.
Then you've got lot 15B on this Neponset Valley plan, and my question is whether lot 15B is the same lot as lot 50 from the 1896 plan.
Are you looking at the plot plan and comparing
No,
it to
this looks like a recorded plan from the Norfolk Registry. Looks to me like it is.
Oh, okay. So that's this plan, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, you see?
W.W. Churchill, is that the one you're talking about? No.
Yeah.
Yes. That's an 1896 plan,
Right.
and I have an earlier 1894 plan.
Well, I'm just trying to figure, when was the lot created? The lot, the actual lot? It doesn't look like, I can't match that up with the 1896 plan. It's also not, I don't think, on the 1890 plan. It looks like there's more land there.
Lot 51 is the lot with the current lot with the
Right,
house.
I'm focused on 15B.
I have to admit, it's been a while since I've looked
Yeah.
at these plans. I did have this figured out originally, let me just see.
I don't know that the lot with the house on it is shown on the 1896 plan.
No, it
It's
is.
not, well,
Yeah, no,
yes,
no,
it
'cause
is.
no, I don't know.
That's 51, that's 51.
No, 51, oh, you're right, okay.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
it's.
Upside down.
What I meant was,
Exactly.
this lot isn't shown. I mean, the second lot, the 10,000
Right, I
square
have to
foot
go
lot
back
is
to
not
the
shown on
deed,
that
and
plan.
if you'll just give me a minute, I'll tell you what the references are, and it may explain
Because
it.
51,
The first lot is lot 51, that's referenced in the first part of the deed.
The other lot is where it says Granite Railway Company. It goes off the,
I'm sorry,
off the plan.
yeah, the first lot in the plan is,
When was that second lot
it's,
created?
it may have confused you by giving you that early subdivision plan. The first lot, I'm going to give you this deed, because I think it'd help you to have this as part of your record. You'll see 2 lots described in the deed. The first lot is a lot described by, it's a description. And that same description has been carried through since 1896 or whenever.
So that's a meets and bounds
It's a
description.
meets and bounds description. The second lot is a reference to this plan. It's lot 51. So you need to, I should have given you the deed, actually, because I didn't make that completely clear. However, the meets and bounds description has been on, a part of a deed description, and the same people own this property anyway all this time, since when it was first written, which I think may slightly precede when the owners who owned this house for many years purchased it and built the house. I think it was, in 1896, when that description was first created. And it was land that belonged to Granite Street Railway.
Individually, it was a separate lot, though.
It was a separate lot, yes. And it's the same lot, described the same way. Well, I mean, there hasn't been any conveyance anyway. I'm trying to find the original plans for you.
The title shows that this lot was created prior to 1938.
Oh, yes. And the same people owned that, both lots from 1903 or earlier until last year. Well, it was put in a trust, but it was the family's trust.
That's your acquisition deed? That's the deed you just gave us?
I believe it is.
Yeah, from Mark Murphy, right? Is it?
I'm not sure, but it went into a family trust.
This is a deed to 61 Sheldon LLC.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
from the family
Oh,
trust
so
to
there.
61 Sheldon. And I have the trust documents for the family trust. Does that hint?
No, he's got a separate tax bill? Both lots?
Yes.
You want to see it, Sharon?
No, I don't. I'm fine. So, did you have anything else you'd like to add, Marion, or you?
I don't.
I have one more thing that is that the reason, like, when I first was going to buy it is because when I was looking at the other lot, and there used to be a fence, I have a fence, now, but there used to be like a kind of a boundary fence go up it anyway, like, you know. When if you stand on the street, as the numbers go down, like, you know, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63 is missing, 64, 65. So it'll become 63 Sheldon because it's like as if it always was going to be 63 Sheldon, you know, like as a own identity address as well, because 63 is missing on the street. And as you come across up and down, it's right where 63 should be. So for address, it doesn't, it works.
Ted?
So, the application is seeking a special permit with respect to both lots, right?
Yes, because you're now dividing what,
Right.
according
And
to our
and
bylaws,
otherwise,
is
the other one will be considered non-conforming unless the one with the house on it.
That's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Mullen, are you all set?
Well, we're going to hear more testimony.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if there is more testimony,
Okay, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm fine for now.
Okay, Mrs. McGettrick, have you concluded your presentation?
I have.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Let's see if there's any person present here who has any questions of Mrs. McGettrick or, yes, ma'am. Now, hold on, time out here. Because we're on TV, these microphones, they don't project, they just record, so you're going to have to come up here and,
You can sit right where.
okay, there you go.
So is the house gonna
No,
build?
no, time out. You have to introduce yourself. Tell us your name and address.
My name is Becky,
Becky, can I get your last name and spell it?
D-E-N-G, D-E-N-G.
D-E-N-G, Becky. And where do you reside? Where do you live?
58 Sheldon Street.
Great. Thanks for coming tonight.
You're welcome.
You have a question?
Yes, so where's the house exactly gonna be built? Like, in between the house or up to the hill?
Mr. O'Driscoll, I think, you have that?
Yes.
Would you show this?
So this is the house now. This is the proposed dwelling.
The garage, okay.
And then this is the house that you'll actually be looking at, which is very similar to next door.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions?
Yes, so, even though this is like dead end street, so there's a lot of like kids running around playing soccer. So how, sorry, I'm a little bit nervous.
No, you take your time, just keep your voice up, that's the only thing, so we can
So,
record it.
how does the construction ensure the kids, they're safe?
Okay, how does the construction or the location of the proposed dwelling take into consideration the safety of children playing in the street or in the neighborhood?
Because there's like so many kids just like, playing like soccer or, all this kind of like activity on the
Okay,
streets.
no, that's a very legitimate question. Mrs. McKettrick, do you want to answer that question, or do you want to at least address the question?
I can certainly address it generally to say that when you're building something new on a site, there are building regulations, and the town has regulations that say that you have to protect the site so that children can't get onto it and can't hurt themselves. So it's usually some form of fencing. Andy Strauss is kind of managing the construction, and he might be able to address that more specifically for you. But in my experience, the fencing has to be designed so that you can't just walk onto the site. So while you're working during the day, there'll be an opening because people have to be able to get in and out. But it's supposed to be closed off at night so that kids can't walk onto the construction
No,
site.
I mean on the streets, when the
So
construction.
you're worried about
You went after the
trucks.
construction was completed. Is that right? You're not talking about how the construction site is protected?
No, I mean on the street, when the, construction car come.
Yeah, you're worried about trucks and construction cars blocking the street or being dangerous because
Yeah,
of
because so,
kids. Right. Yes.
I mean, how long the construction gonna take, we don't know yet.
I'd like to ask Ms.
We can find that out.
I think we should ask the construction manager to address that, and also to talk about the fact that, I can tell you that in Milton, you're required to keep your construction vehicles off the road and on the site. Occasionally, sometimes, there are times when vehicles have to come and be in the road for a while. The neighbors need to be notified. The DPW, manages that process, but it is something that a construction manager needs to be very much aware of. And it is different from a renovation project. When you're building a new house, you have to be careful to keep all the equipment off the street. And safety of children and anybody else in the street would have to be a priority. But maybe you'd like to
Marion, can I
address
just
that.
ask you, those protocols that you were talking about, they're part of the permit, the construction permit when it gets issued?
They are. I encounter this more often with a bigger permit, special permit for a development, for example. And in those special permits, you would write that in as a condition. So I would ask the board to consider whether there's anything they want, if they consider granting this special permit, whether they might want to say something either generally or specifically to address this concern. There are regulations in place, but if there's a specific, you live near the site, so to the extent you can, you should articulate what it is you're worried about. I think you're worried about trucks and construction vehicles being in the street, endangering your children. You want to know that they're going to be off the street on the site And if there is a situation where they have to be on the street for a while, that you'll be notified ahead of time. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, let me say this, and you can offer whatever evidence you want on that. These construction safety regulations and protocols, whether they're under the state building code or under the Milton Charter, they'd be within the jurisdiction of the building inspector and his associates. So we certainly, if we allowed this special permit, we would flag your issue so that the building inspector would be aware that there are a lot of children down in this area and that perhaps some special precautions have to be taken. But you don't want us getting involved in setting up construction protocols and safety protocols because, to be frank about it, we really have no experience there. And we're liable to make things worse rather than better. But,
So if I may, so there are already many state and local regulations about how construction goes on, the hours, and how the area is fenced off, and when things are allowed to happen, and when notices must be given. I think also in this case, the project that you're talking about, this is not really that big a project. Probably, I would say, less than 6 months, about 6 months.
It'd be at least 6 months for,
Yeah.
as regards the traffic, you know.
Well, depending, yeah, but. it's
because
not much
after
more.
6 months, you'd be working on the interior of the
Oh,
dwelling.
yeah, well, I think probably less than that.
After three
After 3 months.
3 months, it'd be
Yeah.
the pickups coming down the street,
Yeah.
you know, a van coming down the
But
street.
this is, it's a house made out of wood. It's not like concrete, a lot of concrete trucks coming in or, cranes or things along those lines. It's a kind of a small project. It's a small house. And I think compared to a lot of bigger projects you may be thinking of, there won't be as many construction vehicles as you might imagine. But there are rules and regulations that cover it all.
And we can flag that issue. If we grant the special permit, we can flag that in the decision, asking that Mr. Prondak and his associates in the inspector's office, the building commissioner's office, give special attention to that particular issue. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Yes.
Yes.
I know earlier they kind of compared the lot size between like Quincy and Milton,
Yes.
but Quincy and Milton is like the difference between like that's the city and then this is the town, so they're like different.
Yes, I think that's right.
Yeah.
But it's just what Mrs. McGettrick was looking at. She was looking at the neighborhood and the consistency of smaller residences on smaller lots in the neighborhood, and pointing out that these lots were larger, and therefore they had more flexibility in designing a house and perhaps setting up some safety protocols that may be more difficult on a smaller lot.
Okay.
Okay? Great, thank you for coming tonight. Is there anybody else who is present who has any questions of the applicant or Mrs. McGettrick? Okay, so there's no such other person present. Is there anybody present this evening who wishes to speak in opposition to this application for a special permit or variance? Okay, the record indicates there's no such person present, so Mr. Mullen or Mr. Daber, do you have any further questions of the applicant? I see Mr. Mullen's, his eyes here are starting to churn. Go ahead,
Can you
Mr.
ask
Mullen.
about people in support, or?
Well, I thought I did, but if I didn't, is there anybody present who wishes to speak in support of this application?
I support it, but I don't need to speak.
Okay, that's fine. And Mr. Mullen, you have a question?
So the lots today, has it always been as if it was one lot? Is there one fence around the property, or how has it been used historically?
The lots have been used together, I guess.
One
yeah.
lot the yard for the other lot?
So to speak, yeah.
Yeah.
It's always kind of like, Yeah, I guess, yeah, I suppose it was always like one lot, like, yeah, really, but
Yeah, so if the lots were actually separated, would the current lot, would they lose their yard or any parking or anything that goes with that lot?
No.
the parking's on the opposite side.
Parks on the opposite side. Is there anything on the lot 15B to be demolished?
There's a garage.
Yeah,
Garage, and that's where the driveway's going to be?
that's where actually where the house is.
The house is where the garage is?
Yeah, the garage is right there.
Because it's up front to the front.
The driveway's going to be in Milton and Quincy?
No, this is the only part that's in Quincy.
What is that shown there? It says Prop 2 or whatever?
No,
I
that
can't
was-
make it out.
It's.
Palm Drive?
It's nothing, it's just put in.
It's Car Drive?
Proposed,
Oh, proposed.
but we're not proposing it.
Where, is it going to be off-street parking?
The garage is here, in the front of the house, so the car will drive right up.
This is not a garage.
Oh, no, go,
This is just.
it's going to go like
parking.
this. It's going to go, you drive in and you go in the garage this way?
No, this is just a, just
Well, what is
proposed
this?
2 cars.
Okay, so you don't have a garage.
It's a paved
You said
area.
you said it was nothing. It is something.
It is nothing. It's not nothing.
Driveway.
It's not a building.
It's a drive, it's not a, he meant it's not a structure.
It is a driveway.
thought you were asking was it a garage?
No, I was asking what the improvement
And
is.
there's no disadvantage to the existing
Yeah.
structure.
So the house is going to be facing Sheldon Street, and on the left, there's going to be a two-car driveway. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I don't think we've established, actually, John, that the lot has existed prior to 1938. That's the issue I have. I mean, I see it in the writing, but I think the problem with one issue is, the building inspector's letter says that the lot was recorded, the lot was recorded in the year 1896, but I actually don't see that anywhere. I see it as an adjacent property owned by the railway in the title report. I think we need more title work here.
No, actually,
No?
the work was done. If you don't have it in front of you, I apologize. What happened here was, a year ago, I wrote an opinion letter for the building inspector, and I didn't give it to you here because the procedure I usually use is, if I have a question about a lot like this and someone has asked me for an opinion, and that's how my relationship with the applicant began. I studied the lot, I studied the title history, I studied all the recorded plans, and I wrote an opinion letter essentially similar to what you're seeing as the bulk of the material in this application. I submit that to the building inspector, and I ask him to tell me whether he disagrees or he agrees, or whether he has comments, or we in fact here had several meetings and discussions talking about everything. The history, the deed history, the recorded lots, the Milton zoning bylaw, what aspects of the bylaw might apply to these lots, and talked quite a bit about the merger provision and the fact that our bylaw is written in a rather unusual way. And the building inspector's conclusions were the same as mine. So I can give the board a copy of that opinion letter. If I don't have it with me, I will provide it, so that you'll see. So the reason the building inspector is saying this is that he has additional material for me that you're not seeing here. And when the building inspector, and I understand you'd like to have that and know what he's basing that on.
I mean, it's a precondition to the application of the section. It's more than just wanting
No,
it.
no,
We
I
have to see it. You have to establish,
No, I
the
have it.
predicate for this section, which I think applies if we get there, is that the lots are recorded and in the same ownership at the time the bylaw is adopted. I think you have to establish when the bylaw is adopted that they're in common ownership and that the lots actually exist. And I don't see that here.
Well, I get, all right, so you want to see the original deed.
I don't know, I would think we'd have the title report, something, yeah, just
Well, all you
because,
need is the original deed, because I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Continue what you were going to say, and I'll answer.
go ahead.
I apologize for interrupting. The original deed, I think it's 1903, will provide exactly the same lot description as the deed that I gave you. The same owner owned the lot.
Yeah. I actually disagree with that. It says, at the time the bylaw was adopted. It doesn't say
Yes.
1903.
No, I
It
know
has to be
that.
1938. We got to know what was on the ground in
Right, but I
1938.
think Mrs. McGetrick is suggesting
Yes.
there were no changes
Well,
from
no,
1903.
It's not
to-
quite that. What I do is I go to the assessor's records to begin with to see when the house was built.
Okay,
And the assessor's record said the house was built in 1903.
Okay.
That establishes that the house was there. Now, I guess, whatever. So, do I have a 1938 assessor's record? No. I mean, I don't have access to that. But the way I develop the
need
record
that.
is by looking at when the house was built, looking at the deed, and normally there are many transactions, the lot changes hands. This one didn't. So we're actually dealing with the original deed, and then the deed that put the land into trust, and then the deed that conveyed to Mr. O'Driscoll's trust.
Is that
So-
all that there's been, is that the only 3 deeds since
Yes.
1903?
Yes.
So that's the complete chain of title from?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
And so all of that is true. I would say, and you do need that, because this is the exception and it relates to that part of the bylaw. If I don't, let's see if I may have those deeds here, because this isn't everything, but a lot of this material is here.
We have on the, this is the adjacencies.
yes.
This is the deed to William Clark for Lot 51, which is the lot with the house on it, but you also want the, and there's another deed that's a slightly later deed for the second lot, which is what you need. I should have that here, but, okay, this is the deed to, okay. Okay, here they all are.
So why don't you...
So I'm just going to give you everything that I have.
Okay, why don't you describe, Marion, if you would, please?
Yes.
What additional evidence you're providing, so we'll have it as part of the record, and what title information. And could I ask a stupid question before you get involved in that?
Yeah.
That is, as part of the purchase of this property, did the applicant have secure title insurance? And was there any, is there a title insurance thing?
Of course, he had a loan from the bank, so of course title insurance was issued.
And I'm not a conveyancer, but Mrs. McGetrick, would that be something that would be a further evidentiary?
I could have used that. I had done my own title research already, but normally I often do ask an applicant to provide the report that came from the title company, and we could certainly provide that. I assume we could anyway.
And I don't think, as I remember, I can't swear, but as I remember, I don't remember any exceptions on that title insurance policy in regards to any of the discussion that we're having at the moment.
Well, let me ask Mr. Mullen, I usually don't ask my board members questions, but Mr. Mullen, would a review of that title insurance policy be of any assistance?
No.
It wouldn't.
No, I think what you want is what I have here.
It wouldn't show the policy wouldn't show what was there in 1938.
You need an ordinarily you get, this would be like, this is something that calls for an abstract.
But if Ms. McKettrick has the deeds, shows the chain of title
Yeah.
since then, that it references the prior deed, but it doesn't give a date of the prior deed on the,
Yeah, nor does it say it was the same premises conveyed. So,
it says for grantor's
Yeah.
title, but, yeah.
a little tricky. You just want to establish that as of 38, you had common ownership. I understand that it may have been prior to and later, but it's actually not that difficult to establish that, so.
Well, I think it's
we
going to
can do
be
that.
established when
Yeah.
Mrs. McGettrick offers the 3 deeds, and we accept her representation that she has done the title on this property, and those are the 3 instruments of conveyance.
It's just confusing because these are old deeds. I know I certainly have them. Okay, well, I'm going to start with a deed recorded at book 1387, page 569, was for the vacant lot. This is a linear meets and bounds description,
And what's the date of that deed?
and it's 1917.
I'm good.
James Clark acquired the property from the Granite Street Railway. So that's that deed. The earlier deed is for the lot with the house on it. I'm trying to find the earliest.
No, we don't really need that, right? So if you can start, 1917 is adequate. So what we need is Clark's next deed, right?
Yeah.
The railway conveying to
That's the
Clark.
same meets and bounds as on this
I'm
one.
going to check that, I know.
So you need Clark's next deed. You mean the deed
Clark's
out?
deed out.
And that's the one that I've given you. I have all of the
No, you should have 28859, 338. It looks like maybe a deed into the trust.
right. I have that.
Marjorie Clark and
Yeah.
James Clark are related.
Yep, yes.
They had a long time.
There's a confirmatory deed, there's a trustee's deed.
Northerly.
Not longer than any of us been around.
Trying to find the earliest deed after 1938. They did a series of,
Northerly. Yeah, it's the same. That's 1917.
Good.
Yeah.
And that's the one at book 1387, page 569.
Yeah.
okay, here's a 1961 deed, book 3908, page 317, granting the 2 lots, the lot with the house on it and the second
Date
lot.
on that, Mary?
This is a 1961.
Yeah, good.
Okay, does that,
Who's the grantor?
the grantor is Herbert Clark. He's granting to Herbert Clark, Jenny Clark, and Jenny Clark. It's just adding her on as a, actually, I don't know if Herbert
Who's
Clark.
he? Is James his son?
Yes.
Robert James'
I
son?
don't even know if it's the son, okay.
You gotta know. right?
There's, well, okay, here, I'm going to give you this one. I just want to see,
Spend so much time in the
3908,
cemetery.
317.
Herbert
I
Clark.
thought that was kind of creepy, but now I know...
That's what you do, John.
Now I know why you
You've
were
never
there.
been to Northbridge. Ah. Yeah. Clark died.
Yeah, I think,
James, you mean?
Yeah, this went into probate.
yes.
Robert Clark.
All right, I have 2 copies.
He bought the property in 17. This is probably the next deed. 61.
I have the trustee's certificate establishing the trust.
So that was a deed from Robert Clark to Herbert Clark?
No, I think what happened was Robert Clark died. It may have been an intervening conveyance to Mary Clark and Robert Clark, husband and wife.
Oh, okay.
She died too. How about Clark's acquisition deed of 51? You have that? Because they have to have both been owned in 38. So my title, see, State of Robert Clark. Yeah, see. Herbert Clark was Robert Clark's issue. There you go, John. You're not as
I'm following it. I'm not a conveyancer like you are, but I'm trying to follow what you're saying. I do know that people out in TV land have fallen asleep by now, but that's not our function to keep them awake.
So you're looking for something earlier than 1961?
No. I think, I mean, this isn't a title, we're just looking at deeds, but it does
Right.
seem like they owned it in 17, and then the family had it in 1961. And then the question is, what about the next door lot? Because they have to have been in common ownership for the
Right,
exception to apply.
yeah, so you're looking for the
You got the
original.
deed out, but you don't have the deed in. When did Clark get?
The
when did-
deed in for Lot 51 is in 1896
Clark?
to William Clark,
Yeah, okay.
page 760, book 760, page 121. This is not, that's my reference. I don't have a copy of that, but that's the reference. That's the original deed to William Clark.
Yeah.
So-
How about Robert James Clark?
Well, Robert James Clark is a later
Yeah.
descendant. They're not, they died and they inherited. I can tell you that much. There is not a series of deeds,
Yeah, no,
other than what I have here. I have
That's
everything.
fine. We don't need that to establish common ownership, but it looks like,
The 1917 deed, you have it in front of you. Who was that granted
There's
to?
another 1917
Robert J.
deed
Clark.
Okay.
referred to in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and...
Herbert Clark,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, this is Herbert Clark out to
sorry.
himself and Jenny Clark, his wife.
Oh, no, but in the title reference at the end, there's a reference to a 1917 deed.
Yeah.
okay, this is
From
the 19...
Lillian
Okay,
Bishop to Herbert Clark.
okay. This is for Lot 51 in 1917. It's from Lillian Bishop to Herbert Clark.
Yeah.
Okay, so you want this one?
Well, Herbert Clark owns the lot in 1917?
Yes.
He owns 51.
He owns both lots in 1917.
Well, I think James on the
Oh,
other
who do you have in the...
Robert James.
Robert James or just James?
Robert James.
Robert James.
That's a deed in of Robert James in 17 for the locust. And the next door lot was owned by Herbert. I think.
Well, let me ask this. Does it
Yeah.
make any sense
Okay, this is
to
Robert.
basically suspend this hearing?
I can give you this information. I don't like to
Yeah, no, I have
waste your
no doubt that
time
it's
like
there.
this.
Well, the problem, Mary...
I understand
is-
what you're trying to address. You want to make sure that I've shown you clearly that the same owner, well, no, it doesn't have to be the same owner, but that both lots were owned in common in 1938.
Yeah, I should explain myself why I'm interested. So, we've had in the last couple of years a number of applications similar to this. This is a pretty unique fact pattern. This isn't going to happen a lot in this town, I don't think, where you're really invoking a section. You know, when we do this, I always write down what the address was of the section that was invoked. I've never had this section before, and so that tells me that's just a pretty unique set of facts. But still, it's increasingly common where what's happening in Milton is the infill lots that were left behind are getting filled in. You guys know that better than I do. It's your business. But I think we need to be careful that it does apply. And because the predicate of Section 6, which is being invoked, and does appear to apply based on most of the testimony, I just don't think that we've established the requirement that the lots are recorded and in the same ownership at the time the bylaw is adopted. So you really need an abstract of both lots to establish that fact. And
We can give
so
it to you.
I don't think it's hard to do, and I'm not questioning Mrs.
Already done.
McKettrick's research. I just don't think we've got all the facts, that's all.
You don't have it in front of you.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
apologize
that's
for that.
all. No, that's okay.
I do have it. We also have the title search that was done, so if you don't mind, if you have information like that, you can give it to me,
Let me
just
give it
to help.
Oh,
me.
absolutely,
But,
yeah. Is that
I
everything?
think when I go back, I have another big file on this case. I believe I have everything that you're looking for, but it's a waste of time to try to, leaf through all this now, and you have another case tonight. So if the board is willing to continue this, hopefully not for too long, I can get the information together very quickly.
It makes perfect sense to me.
We could talk about title work anytime you want, John. You want to talk on Saturday?
Not particularly. Let's see what Mary has available.
How far out are we thinking? Next week?
I can do it as soon as you want it.
Yeah, no, I
promise
gathered that.
Yeah.
I'm confident that the record is there, so. Do we have is a building permit imminent here?
Nothing can happen until,
Pursuant to your
No, there's a
decision.
design of the building's ready to go and the financing's lined up?
that's true, yes. Took a while to get the date, actually, for the hearing, so,
I see.
no, it does.
Tuesday or Wednesday? I don't know what your schedule is.
Next week?
I mean, I can do Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday after next week.
Thursday and Friday are out for me.
Wednesday's good.
I can do the 27th or 28th.
28th's Wednesday.
Yes.
I think I'm okay for the 28th, yeah.
The 28th
Okay.
would be the blue. 7:30?
Sure.
Is that fine with you, Jeffrey? 7:30? Okay.
Now, if you'd like, I will submit this information electronically, and
Absolutely.
Mary can send it out to you, then you'll have it before the hearing. Is that a good way to do it?
It
Terrific,
is,
thank
yeah,
you.
that's perfect. Okay, let me just establish one thing, because we want to try to finish this hearing on the 28th. So there's nobody else present here in the audience who has any questions or has anything further to say on this application. Is that true? Because if that is true, what we're going to do is we're going to end the evidence portion of this proceeding right here and now, with the exception of allowing Mrs. McGettrick to supplement the record with information on the title, so as to meet the technical requirements of the bylaw. And that's right, so when you can get that to us in advance, that would be very helpful. And so we'll meet on the 28th at 7:30 in the Blue Conference Room for the purpose of seeing if the board members have any questions regarding the title information that you've submitted. And if there are no such questions, we'll proceed to consider this application and vote on it right then and there. Okay?
Great.
So we're going to suspend until the 28th of June at 7:30 in the Blue Conference Room. And I'd like to thank everybody for their time and their patience in this somewhat technical hearing. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much. Great.
So when I was first out of law, before I went to law school, I was a title examiner. And,
Oh, good for you.
we used to do a lot of work down in Northbridge. Do you know Northbridge at all? Down in South Worcester County.
Generally. but
So it's
not-
really three villages, Whitensville, Linwood, and then Northbridge. Northbridge was Whitensville was the home of the Whiten Machine Works, Paul Whiten and his family. And we used to do a lot of title work there. I went to their Cedar Grove Cemetery to see all their graves. We spent so much time with their records. They ultimately, I think, got purchased by a large company. I've forgotten what it is now. It's still there. Anyway, very interesting. Sorry about that.
No, that's-
No, you're absolutely right. This is 70 Hillside.
Mary, could you send us a note on that, just so it gets on our calendar? No, I would not like to text.
Now, do you have any part of the record in this one, Jeffrey, or those, is that just?
No, these are just my
supplied to
own
you?
things,
Okay,
yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
So,
My own private
I don't
files.
think I have any.
okay, I don't think I do. So, Mary, that's going to be, it's going to be yours.
Okay. That's yours, John?
This is.
Yeah.
Thank you. You all set? Wait for Mary to come back. Yeah, well, that's all right.
She hit record though, but she said she said I'm hitting it.
No, we'll wait for her to come back. She won't be long.
I figured we would, but.
All set? All set, Jeffrey?
Oh, yeah. I was here on time.
Thank you. Excuse me. Sure, no, you don't have to excuse.
Just,
Okay.
I was here on time,
Yes, you were.
yeah.
Yes. We're going to call to order our third and final hearing of the evening. This is on the May 17, 2017 application of Philip Johanning and John Rowe, both of 23 Parkwood Street, Milton, Massachusetts, appealing the issuance of a conditional occupancy permit by the Milton Building Commissioner dated May 9, 2017, regarding the property of Thea Nursery at 270 Hillside Street and other locations that are surrounding that. The applicants are requesting that the occupancy permit that was issued be rescinded until all mitigation, which is required by the Planning Board special permit dated July 15, 2016, is completed. My name is John Leonard. I'm Chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me this evening, to my immediate left is Board Member Jeffrey Mullen. To my immediate right is Board Member Theodore Deba. The rules are going to be such as they were for the other two hearings. We'll hear from the appellants or their counsel, and then we'll hear from interested persons, people who wish to speak in support of the application, and people who wish to speak in opposition to the application. Mr. Prondak was here, he's still here. The proceedings are being tape recorded, so they would ask that before anyone speaks, tell us your name and address, speak up nice and loud, so we'll have an accurate record of the proceeding. In addition, as evidence at the hearing, we have the application and the appeal that is dated May 17th, 2017. It's signed by Attorney Matthew Dunn on behalf of the appellants. We have the occupancy permit that is dated May 9th, 2017, that's signed by Mr. Prondak. We have several emails that relate to this particular application, which I'm not going to take the time to read. We have a May 2nd, 2017 letter of Eagle Brook Engineering and Survey LLC, to Mr. Dunn's law firm, the Dunn Law Group, Inc. of Boston and Hingham, Massachusetts, signed by Michael, it looks like I. Giuliano, a professional engineer and a professional land surveyor as well. We also have a letter of March 31, 2017, from DeSell and Burke to Mr. Joshua Oldfield of Thayer Nursery, 270 Hillside Street. It's entitled On-Site Inspection of Thayer Nursery. I received this about 10 minutes before the hearing today. I don't know, do you have a copy of this, Mr. Dunn? Does it make, you have it, okay, great. And we have received from Mr. Dunn, the attorney for Mr. Joe Henning and Mr. Rowe.
I'm sorry, John, just before you went, which piece of evidence came in at 2 o'clock this
Well,
afternoon?
I thought it did the first time I saw it, but
Is the March 31 letter?
yes.
Oh, okay,
But
fine.
it's in the file, but I just didn't get a copy.
Okay, okay,
so I-
okay.
And I don't know,
I just didn't know if DeSell sent something today.
I would think not, but I don't know.
One letter. One letter from DeSell.
Yeah, just March 31, 2017.
Okay.
I just saw, Mary handed it to me when I came in. But-
I received that 5 past 5 or somewhere around there today.
From?
Today.
From Mr. DeSell?
From Joe Ponda.
Oh, from Mr. Prondak.
So I
Okay.
forwarded it on to you guys.
But you,
Oh, appreciate that, thank you.
okay, but it wasn't filed with the board until today.
No.
It was just sent to the Oldfields, the owner of their nursery.
I would assume Mr. Ponda gave it to me,
Okay.
and I forwarded it.
All right, that's fine, that's fine. And I was just referring to an email from Mr. Dunn, Thursday, June 22nd, and Mr. Dunn has submitted in his email, May 22nd, 2017, Eagle Brook Engineering Survey, the May 2nd, 2017 survey, and a memorandum of law and an argument as to the position of Mr. Joe Henning and Mr. Rowe in this matter, consisting of 8 pages, dated June 22nd, 2017. So, Ms. Oldfield, do you have a copy of this letter from Mr. Dunn with his memorandum and all of that?
Mrs. McGettrick just handed it to me. I just received it tonight, I just gave it to Maggie right now.
Okay, great. And Mrs. McGettrick, you're going to be representing their nursery in this matter, or are you just consulting?
I'm
Or
available here if you would like me to speak.
I just want to know whether you're engaged as counsel or you're an interested person.
I'm engaged by their nursery.
Okay, great, thank you. So we'll have all of those documents as evidence at this proceeding. So I think unless anyone has any further preliminaries, Mr. Dunn, I think the field is yours.
Thank you.
And Mr. Joe Henning, if you want to come up here, you certainly feel comfortable. Mr. Prondak, if you'd like to come up.
So,
So, Mr. Dunn, welcome back to the Board of Appeals.
thank you, it's good to be back. Thank you for entertaining this appeal. You referenced the memo that I submitted this afternoon. I have copies for each member that also has attachments that are referenced in the memo to assist basically in the discussion.
Great. Thank you very much. We appreciate this. So I'm not going to restrict your presentation, but hopefully we can concentrate more on what's happening in 2016 and 17 and not overly deal with 2014.
I understand.
And some of the other matters that are contested and still being.
There's a lot of water under the bridge, and
There
that
is.
was basically what the first 4 pages of my memo
But you
talked
deal
about.
with any preliminaries that you think you have to represent your client?
I think it's enough to say that this is a longstanding dispute between Thayer Nursery and its neighbor, particularly Mr. Joenning and Mr. Rowe, that dates back, at least with regards to my client, back to 2013. There was, following a series of decisions by, or two decisions by this board, 2013, 2014, there was an amendment to the Town of Milton bylaws that gave Thayer this opportunity to apply for a special permit. Now, a copy of that bylaw amendment is included in the materials that I provided to the board members as Exhibit 1, and that gives an outline as to the parameters as to when and how a special permit should issue in what particular circumstances. That bylaw amendment was later modified in 2016. That's actually the last 2 pages. It's the proposed amendment, but this is essentially what was incorporated into the bylaw through a special town meeting vote in, I believe, February of 2016. So taken together, this is the operative provision of the bylaws that allows Thayer to apply for a special permit that they were conditionally granted on July 15th of 2016. And a copy of that decision is included as Exhibit Number 2 in the package of materials that I just provided. And that lays out, I think it's a 27-page decision that includes a number of plans that are incorporated into the decision. And not only does the special permit indicate that the plans are incorporated into the decision, but the bylaw amendment actually requires that they be included in as part of the special permit. So just as the words on the paper are part of the special permit, so too are the site plans, the drainage mitigation plan, the landscape plan. Those are all part of and parcel of the special permit.
Could I ask you just one question, so we, at least you have the record clear? The Article 2 of the warrant, which is Exhibit 1,
Yes.
While that is past town meeting, the validity of that is under challenge. Is it in the Superior Court?
It's currently in the appeals court.
The appeals court?
Yeah, that's been fully briefed, and oral arguments were heard in March of this year, and it's under advisement by the appeals court currently.
And likewise, the special permit that was issued, which is Exhibit Number 2, is that likewise part of that?
So the special permit it's related. The special permit was appealed under 48 Section 17 to the Land Court, and then Judge Shire stayed the litigation in that action pending a decision by the appeals court on the validity of the underlying amendment. Because if the amendment goes away, then the special permit would, go away as well.
Okay. I'm sorry to have interrupted you. Why don't you continue?
That's okay. So I'm telling you that basically giving the history of this because, as I said, that the plans and the requirements become part of the special permit. Now, as I think all the members here today might be familiar, we were before this board back in the fall. A decision was issued January 4th of 2017. On basically it was on procedural grounds as to were we before the board appropriately to assess their compliance or non-compliance with the requirements of the special permit. And at that point, it was discussed that there needed to submit an application for an occupancy permit to Mr. Prondak, and that Mr. Prondak would make an assessment on whether or not they're complied. Important in that decision and in that conversation was the injection of this term substantial compliance. That word doesn't exist in the bylaw amendment, and it doesn't exist in the special permit that was issued to Thayer conditionally. In fact, just the opposite is set forth expressly in the special permit, and that can be found on page number 22 of the decision, and it's the third paragraph. And it talks about strict compliance. It says, "The planning board determines that these standards, including the specific standards and requirements imposed by zoning in subsection N, will be met if there is strict compliance with the terms, conditions, limitations, requirements specified in the special permit. There shall be no material changes to operations, site features, or additions to site features without amendment of the special permit." So this was a product of a very long process, as I'm sure Thayer can agree to. The application, number one, the review process with regards to the zoning amendment was a process, and then the application process for Thayer in order to apply for the special permit made available under the amendment was lengthy. And so this was very carefully crafted language by the planning board. And I think that the intent was there was an attempt to try to strike a balance between recognized harms that were being experienced by the neighbors as a result of these commercial uses, including landscaping uses, and Thayer's ability to resume operations on the site. And I think a fair reading of this indicates that the requirements that are set forth in the special permit needed to be put in place beforehand, before the commercial activities resumed on site, in order to provide those protections to the abutters. And so that's why that language, strict compliance, is put into that paragraph instead of substantial compliance. To require substantial compliance instead of strict compliance is actually to alter or amend the language of the special permit itself, which is what that second sentence in the paragraph that I just read talks about. So I understand, I think Mr. Prondak has a very difficult job, to say the least, in this situation. But I think respectfully to him, that it's a misreading of the very requirements of the special permit to say that there needs to be substantial compliance in order for this occupancy permit to issue, because that's not the case, that's not what the special permit says, and that's not what the special permit requires. So just with respect to that, I just think that respectfully to Mr. Prondak, that he's sort of exceeded his authority with regards to interpreting the bylaws. And it's a point where it's almost rewriting the explicit requirements of the special permit to say that, they're almost there and it's almost good enough, when the special permit itself says that that's not sufficient. So,
But doesn't substantial performance at some point in time come very, very close to strict compliance?
So strict compliance, and I think that this has also been considered, would be, there are specific plans that are, again, incorporated into the special permit. And even Mr. Prondak in his decision talks about an as-built certification from an engineer to say that, look, the conditions on the ground as this site is built out meet what is required under the special permit. It matches the plan that was approved by the planning board.
So he found specific compliance, strict compliance under that.
So an as-built plan by a certified engineer that said, yes, the conditions on the ground meet the conditions or match the conditions of the site plan. That is strict compliance. Substantial compliance is given at the eyeball test and saying, it looks good enough.
Well, I don't want to get overly involved in this, but I actually tried to look up what the definition of substantial performance was and try to see how it differed from strict compliance. And at least there are multiple definitions of substantial compliance, but one of them is that fulfillment, in the law of contracts, it says fulfillment of the obligations agreed to, this is substantial performance, fulfillment of the obligations agreed to in a contract with only slight variances from the exact terms and/or unimportant omissions or minor defects. To me, that comes pretty close to strict performance.
But it's not the same thing.
It's there's a degree of difference. But it's not looking at a great intent or it comes into general compliance. Substantial compliance is only with slight variances from the exact terms or unimportant omissions or minor defects.
I think that's reading out the explicit express language.
Of
that's
strict compliance.
Of strict compliance that's in black and white in the special permit.
I understand that.
And
All
so-
I'm saying is I think substantial performance is pretty close to strict compliance, isn't it?
I don't know. I know it's not the same thing.
Okay, it's not the same thing, and we agree there. Why don't you continue?
And
with your
so,
presentation?
I don't think that there's a dispute that, I was on the site a week ago, and I can tell you that they have made progress and that's just my personal opinion. Obviously, I represent Mr. Joenning and Mr. Rowe, but I can tell you that they have made progress. But there are problems with the site that it does not comply with what was required and what is part of the plans that are associated with this special permit. The drainage mitigation is not complete. That was a huge issue, both when we were before this board back in the fall. It was also the subject of a private lawsuit that my clients and Thayer were involved in. And so...
That was settled, was it not?
It was settled, and now it's the subject of some ongoing arbitration as well.
As to what was actually agreed to?
As to whether what is on the site, and it's very similar to what's before this board right now, is whether what has been constructed on the site complies with what Thayer agreed to do in the settlement agreement, which actually incorporates the requirements of the plan that's included with the special permit.
Okay, because we're not privy to that.
No, I know that, and so, part of that is that you'll see in the engineering reports of Mr. Giuliano that are included. I included all of the reports that he provided, just so you can get a background as to the flooding issue on Mr. Joenning and Mr. Rowe's property and why this is so important to them. His reports begin on July 21st, 2015, and run through May 22nd of 2017, that outline essentially the conditions as they were before any mitigation was begun on the Thayer Nursery site, and then as he observed them in a site inspection on May 19th. And so the May 19th report of Mr. Giuliano explains, at least with regards to the drainage mitigation, the deficiencies in the current conditions versus what's required under the plan. There's also,
Can you talk about the flooding a little bit more? I'm interested in that.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's in this report that you gave us?
Yes.
Is that in Eagle Brook's letter?
So the Eagle Brook, and I apologize that I didn't give this to you beforehand, the issue about the sort of pre-mitigation flooding is discussed on that exhibit number 4.
Yeah.
That July 21st, 2015 report from
Okay.
Mr. Giuliano. And then it progresses, as part of resolving this private dispute between Mr. Joenning and Mr. Rowe and Thayer Nursery. There was a site inspection on January 19th of 2017. That's reflected in Mr. Giuliano's letter of January 23rd, 2017. There was another inspection on April 26th. That's the next letter, the May 2nd letter from Mr. Giuliano. And then there was a follow-up inspection on May 19th, and that's in his May 22nd letter. And all those are included in exhibit number 4. So, again, I think that I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but there is this issue with strict compliance. I don't think that there is a dispute that there has not been strict compliance. That's what's required under the special permit. And again, respectfully to Commissioner Prondak, I think he's doing a good job, but this is what it is in black and white, and this is what's required.
Right, wouldn't you even say, Mr. Dunn, that even if you took the lesser standard of substantial performance, that there's no substantial performance here, based upon Mr. Giuliano's testimony.
With regards,
Doesn't meet either standard, you'd say.
I think with regards to drainage, you certainly need an as-built, because this was a huge problem for my client. I think that anything that, and this is speaking for Mr. Joining and Mr. Rowe, that anything along that property line, that parcel 1B, that is sort of behind the wood barn, I think you've been out there.
I have, but we've been on Mr. Johanning's property to see the flooding issues
Yeah.
out there.
So, that's, strict compliance, again, is an as-built plan, and that's just what it is. So they either have done it, and an engineer will sign off and say, yep, there, you've done exactly what you said, what the planning board asked you to do, which you were involved in that process for, over a year, and participated in the drawings and in agreeing to do the things that you said you were going to do. So, finish it up and strictly comply and get an occupancy permit and go about your business. But right now, you're not at that point, and so it's premature. With regards to the special permit, or not the special permit, but the temporary occupancy permit that Mr. Prondak issued, I think sort of a lot of the reason why I included the history between these parties is because of what the temporary occupancy permit, and this is included as exhibit number 3, talks about. It sets deadlines for certain events. And in my memo, I outline how I think there's seven criteria, and 5 have not been met. And that's, the 5 are outlined on page 6 of my memo. We talked about the operative conditions of the special permit must be followed. I'm not going to get back into why that is the case, but the installation and approval of a sound attenuation and drainage mitigation measures by the town engineer by May 19th, 2017. I've never seen that. I've never seen the town engineer's approval of either one of the sound attenuation or the drainage mitigation.
But are they in?
What's that?
Are they there?
What?
It says installation and approval. You say that you don't have the approval, but have they been installed? Do you know?
I can say that a portion of the sound attenuation and a portion of the drainage mitigation has been.
Okay.
Permanent concrete bins to divide stockpile materials are to be installed by June 15th, 2017. I was on the site on Monday, last Monday. They weren't there. So I don't know if they are or not, but there's a former vehicle used by Thayer must be permanently removed from the Thayer nursery site. And I'm paraphrasing from the permit here, but and replaced by a new vehicle. It's my understanding that both vehicles are still on site. And then it talks about, and this comes up again, as-built plans are to be submitted by the engineer which certify the location of the sound attenuation fence at the rear easterly property line abutting Cole, Joining Row, and Tevens, that the proposed drainage system is installed and operates per the original design, and that the proposed plantings conform to the original plans along the easterly line. Now, no deadline was put forth in the occupancy permit for that, but I can tell you those haven't been produced here. We wouldn't be sitting here with regards to this appeal. So you have this extremely long and detailed history of Thayer's non-compliance with the bylaws, with this board's decisions, with cease and desist letters from Mr. Prondak, and even from court orders from the Norfolk Superior Court. They've been the subject of 2 contempt actions for failure to abide by this board's decision that ultimately got adopted by Judge Wilson in 2014 as part of a permanent injunction. So I was there yesterday on a contempt hearing on that. So
Was Judge Wilson there, or was some other judge?
It was with Judge Ritucci yesterday.
He knows this case.
What's that?
He knows this case.
Sure he does. So,
That must be an insider joke. I don't know Judge Bertucci.
Lives in Milton.
Does he?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
So, to grant there a temporary occupancy permit and say, we're going to give you this, but you have to promise to do these things, it's almost laughable, because there is this history, and there is this, I mean, you guys must be sick of seeing our faces up here.
No.
And,
I think, put that down for the record. No.
but it's just not going to happen. And so, and that was an issue when we were going through the permitting process here, when Thayer was applying for this. And again, to go back, that's why you have this strict compliance requirement. Because there was this complaint from the abutters that they would never do what they said they were going to do unless there was some sort of carrot that was dangling out there to compel them to comply with the requirements for the special permit. And that's why the language is in there. And so, they haven't complied. Number one, they haven't complied with the requirements of the special permit. Number two, they haven't even complied with the requirements of the temporary occupancy permit. So there's no possible way that there should be operating a landscaping business on that property right now.
Have you completed your presentation?
I have.
Okay, great. Let me see if my colleagues have any questions of Mr. Dunn.
Not at this time.
Mr. Daber? Good, I have no questions of Mr. Dunn, so, Mr. Dunn, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You can stay there if you want, if it's more comfortable using the desk to write, or you can go back to Mr. Joe Henning if you want. Okay.
I guess I would like to just make one quick comment, if you don't mind.
If Mr. Dunn approves of that, you're certainly welcome, sure.
Yeah, I know. I take Plavix and I bleed all the time.
Just one day.
Yeah, I know. You want to tell? No. My name is Phil Joe Henning. I live at 23 Parkwood Drive in Milton.
Welcome to the Board of Appeals, Mr. Joe Henning.
Thank you. The only comment I wish to make is that I understood that town meeting gave abutters protections and gave their rights. And my understanding is that my protections are as important as their rights. And so for me, those things need to happen concurrently. I need to have all my protections when they get all of their rights. And I ask this town, Mr. Prondak, and I ask this board to respect the will of town meeting in providing for me the protections that were given to me under the special permit before Thayer gets the rights that were given to them. I think that's fair. But what I have observed consistently over time is that there's a preference given to the business that should not be there in the first place under the zoning laws. And I don't understand that. And I'm asking that that should stop and that I should receive my protections when they receive their rights. That's all I need to say.
Great, thank you, Mr. Joe Henning. Nobody has any questions here of Mr. Joe Henning, is that fair to say?
No. I would like, if it's possible, maybe, Joe, you have it. Do you have a copy of this?
I do.
Could you give it to us? It's hard to read the one that we've been given.
It's attached to Mr.
There was one in the package
Yeah,
that Mary sent
It
that doesn't have the M in the middle of it.
Oh,
The first package.
oh, the first package, yeah,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
good, okay.
Yeah, that one.
Okay, I don't want to hold anybody else.
Well, I can.
No, I have it here, yeah, okay, thank you. No M.
You want to take a second and read that?
No, I've been reading it, but now I'm just going to read the pieces I couldn't read before.
That's fine. Mr. Prondak is here.
Good evening.
Mr. Prondak, welcome back to the Board of Appeals. It's great to see you again.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Do you want to be heard regarding this appeal?
I think I should be.
Good.
My name is Joe Prondak. I'm the building commissioner for the town of Milton. And I would start by saying respectfully to Mr. Dunn and Mr. Joe Henning that that when this matter was here at the Board of Appeals the last time, my understanding, my perception of what was decided by the board was that substantial compliance was a standard that I could, by which I could issue an occupancy permit. And it's my understanding that that was decided at that meeting, and that meeting was not appealed. Given that understanding, Thayer Nursery has put substantial effort into trying to bring the property into compliance so that they could operate their landscape business. So I did eventually issue an occupancy permit with the conditions noted. Condition number one, all operative conditions of the planning board were to be complied with. That's not an issue. Since the issuance of this permit, that has not come up yet as to whether or not, I'm not even sure there's a need to look at that at this point. Installation of the sound attenuation
I'm sorry, Mr. Prondak, can I just stop you because
Sure.
you throw me a curveball there. The first issue that Mr. Dunn discussed was the drainage issue.
Okay.
And you say that doesn't have to be discussed here?
No, the operative conditions, meaning Thayer has to keep a log of
okay.
deliveries that are laid, and they have to have certain representation, persons managing on site at all times, so not the, so condition number one was just a reference to that.
Okay, that's fine. Why don't you proceed?
I think the heart of this matter, the issuance of this occupancy permit were the physical
That's right. Mr. Dunn did mention these procedural
Right.
logs and books.
Yeah, so there is a portion of the sound attenuation material along the easterly line. It's about 160 feet, I believe, that runs from Forest Street in back on the property. That has not been installed yet, but they have until, in this document, I've said until 6/30, June 30th. There was a question raised by the appellants as to whether or not it was in fact the correct material. I do have an invoice from the company that they purchased the material from, signed by the owner of the company that sold them the material, and I called the company, and I spoke to the person who signed the letter in New Jersey, and she verified for me that they did in fact purchase that amount of that required material. So I feel that I have verified that. All drainage work included the tie-in to the town system.
I'm sorry, Mr. Prondak. Mr. Mullen has a question.
What's the significance of the purchase?
That they purchased the amount, that, to verify that all of the material that they've put up so far was in fact the particular material that was specified in the special permit. I'm sorry, I maybe should have went into a little more detail on that.
So now, but what about, just before you move off number two, Joe, Commissioner, what is the, what's the status of the installation of the remainder?
So we have about 160 feet left along the easterly property line that runs from Forest Street in, not against the, I'm sorry, Johannigan Row property is along the easterly line. The now Cashman property, formerly...
You don't have to give us the chain of
Young lady,
title.
I've forgotten her name.
We got it.
Along that property line, there's some sound attenuation material missing. It's my opinion that the installation of that material, whether that's there or not in that amount, is not going to affect the sound that travels to the Johannigan Row property or the Parkwood
But
Drive.
it's nevertheless required by the
It
permit.
is required by the permit.
How long does it take to put this in?
It's,
Is this a day job, or does it take a month?
I think if they had the material there, I think it would take about a week, maybe 10 days.
For that amount,
that
to install
amount.
that amount?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Commissioner.
And that's just a guess on my part. I haven't been there for all of that installation. So number 3 talks about the drainage work, and it says all drainage work, including the tie-in to the town system at Hillside, must be completed and approved by the town engineer by 5/19. The drainage work, in my estimation, has been completed. The town engineer has verbally to me approved. He has told me that He has observed the tie-in and that the tie-in is complete. There are two engineering reports. There is one that Mr. Dunn referenced by Eaglebrook Engineering, and there's also a report that I submitted earlier from DeSelberg Engineering. And DeSelberg states in his report, this is March 31st, March 31st, 2017, and this is what I asked for. I asked for a report from the engineer who designed the system to give me a statement saying that he believes that the work that has been done to date is working as proposed. And he states on page 204, the last sentence, "The soil is not vegetated at this time, but there is no evidence of stormwater flow generated from the subject site toward the properties along Parkwood Drive. I have reviewed the KLM survey report, and I can confirm a general height of 18 inches and a slope of 1%. And I have been up there during, or immediately after rain events, and I have observed the swale working. The bigger piece of the drainage system was the tie-in at Hillside Street. That's what took the longest amount of time, but that piece of the work was to protect the town, and now that's done. That piece of the work, I mean, I'm not an engineer, but I've been around engineering and water flow for quite some time, and water does flow downhill, and that portion of the work, even had it not been 100% completed, would not have had a dramatic, any effect, I believe, on the Parkwood Drive properties. But that work has been completed, and I have a statement from an engineer saying that even up to that point, that work.
This is the town engineer?
No, this is DeSelberg, and this is the.
But no, you correct me, because this, Mr. Dunn is absolutely correct. This has been going on for ages.
Yep.
And DeSell and Burke are all over the place. They are a very popular engineering firm. We see them in many different capacities.
Yes.
DeSell and Burke, are they not the engineers for Thayer Nursery?
They are.
Okay.
And they, in fact, designed the
And they designed this?
system.
Okay, but they're the engineers for Thayer Nursery. If you had you said the town engineer told you that the drainage system had been tied in?
The tie-in to the town, which the town engineer is required to oversee, because it's gone into the public system. He has said that that is complete and that is satisfactory to the town specifications of that tie-in.
And it's in compliance with the specifications of the special permit? Did he address that issue?
He did not address that issue.
I mean, it may have complied with state law, but maybe the special permit is more technical. I don't know. I'm not an engineer.
No, I don't believe it's that technical. It's you know, bring the swale, which is a surface drainage system, down to a detention basin and make the overflow of that detention basin connect into the town sewer system. It's really that simple. It's a very simple system.
Okay. Without being overly technical, is it true that the Eaglebrook Engineering reports, they have not, in their conclusions, have not been reviewed by the town engineer? Is that true?
I would say they have not, and I don't know that he
And they haven't been
necessarily
reviewed by
would.
any independent engineer?
They have not.
Except perhaps DeSell and Burke, and they're the representatives of the nursery.
Mhm.
And did you, when you were out on the Thayer Nursery property, did you do any, I'm not quarreling with you, did you do any testing to see whether, for example, the soil was 18 inches high?
I did not do any testing, no. I relied on the statement of DeSelbrook that says in general, there are some deficiencies in that of a couple of inches according to the KLIM survey. Eagle Brook Engineering identifies it as 3 to 4 inches. DeSelbrook says it's reasonably 18 inches as it's supposed to be. So yeah, there are discrepancies between the two engineering reports.
Do you think those discrepancies, without meaning to cast a pun on things here, are those discrepancies substantial in your opinion, or are they
I do
incidental?
not think they're significant. I think they can be corrected relatively easy if a third party is introduced or if we just come to some sort of an agreement between the two. I don't think that 2 or 3 inches, if it's that much, on top of the berm is going to make that much difference in the drainage.
Can I ask you this? And I know this isn't part of your responsibilities, but I recall maybe a week or 10 days ago, we really had some torrential rains, maybe an inch or two in one day or something. My plants were flooded out and all of that. Do you know whether Mr. Joe Henning's property in those torrential conditions sustained any drainage issues?
I do not know. It has not been reported to me.
Okay, I mean, I don't... Okay.
But what I would also like to add, I think it's important this year to, that we've had, over the years, we've had significant rainfall similar to what we've just experienced. But this year, we've experienced significant rainfall one after another after another. This is a unique year of rainfall, like none I've ever seen. And I just think it's important to note that. I don't think we've ever had.
Okay, I'm sorry.
This
Why don't you
persistently.
continue with your report?
So I believe the drainage issue, with the exception of maybe some minor corrections to the swale, I believe that is complete. There was also some mention in the engineering reports that pavement to be removed has not been completed by Thayer Nursery yet. The DeSelbrook engine report says that it has been removed. On the DeSelbrook plan that delineates the pavement to be removed, there are no dimensions, it's just a general area. The Eagle Brook Engineering Survey report doesn't mention either. They just said, well, they didn't do what's on the plan. So in cases like this, I do respect the work of Eagle Brook Engineering, but I've known the work of DeSelbrook for almost 30 years. I know them to be a reputable firm. And to me, as a building inspector, it seems that the engineer who designed the project knows the project best and would know, is able to tell better than...
But they're interested, Joe.
I do understand that.
They're interested.
But they also have a reputation, and I've never...
Well, they do
So
have a reputation, but they testified in the 40B we had on Randolph Avenue that seemed to be different from what other engineers were testifying to.
Okay, well...
So they may have a little bit of advocacy to them.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm trying to wade through both sides of this, and I got to come to the best decision I can based on what I have in front of me. The concrete block bins, that is correct. They have not been installed. I put a deadline on that of June 15th. The Oldfields have been in touch with me over the past couple of weeks, explaining to me the difficulties in getting the number of blocks there. However, they have been coming. Some came yesterday, a bunch came today. There are workmen on the site working on that today, and they tell me that more are coming tomorrow. I think the significant issue in the special permit is not so much the construction of the bins. I think the significant issue there is that the bulk material that's to be stored and sold on a regular basis is stored in the land care area. And in one part of the special permit, it speaks of that Thayer Nursery shall construct up to a total of 9 bins. It doesn't necessarily mandate that. as long as the amount of materials that Thayer Nursery stores at any time or over the course of a year, which is regulated by the special permit, as long as they store and move those materials within the land care yard, the construction of the bins really has no benefit to any of the abutters. The construction of the bins is really more of a benefit to Thayer Nursery to keep their materials separate.
Well, I thought they benefited the abutter to the right. I can't remember her name. It's subsequently sold.
Right.
She was complaining of dust and debris and all of that, and the bins was to
Yeah, the
keep
bins-
that in. Because her property was open. I think there was a little fence there, but it
Right.
was just a...
Right. But in any case, I think that, you know, they've been in touch with me. I think, I do expect the bins to be completed soon. And if you look at the last paragraph on my conditional special, say that, subject to revocation by the building inspector upon violation of any of the above noted conditions or failure to meet prescribed timelines without cause as determined by the building inspector. So they did not meet the June deadline on the bins. However, they have been in touch with me as to what exactly is going on with that. So number 5 talks about the trucks, and they did swap out a truck. There's a new Mercedes truck on the property, and they agreed that they would remove a 6500 series nursery truck, which is, just by nature of its name, is a larger truck. So they've taken away a larger truck, put in a smaller truck. I have no evidence that, and have not seen the truck. The truck that's supposed to be gone, as far as I know, is gone. I have not seen that truck back on the property. So I do believe there's compliance there. And I did say that an as-built site plan to be submitted, an as-built to work out these final details, to ensure strict compliance. An as-built site plan that certifies every bit of it.
So when is that supposed to be filed?
I didn't put a date on that. I anticipated some difficulty in some of these other conditions as came up with the bins. I do believe that at some point, if I have to, I will go to Thayer Nursery and say, I need it now, or I need it within a certain time frame. I think I have that authority. I want to make sure that everything gets done and that the as-built is done comprehensively. And that's stated in number 7. The other part of this issuance of the conditional occupancy permit is that it's, part of it is an effort on my part to move this entire issue into a new chapter under the new special permit, under the new law passed by town meeting. I understand it's under appeal. In fact, Judge Bertucci yesterday indicated that he would like to see that happen as well in some of these cases.
What about me, Joe?
No, I'm sorry, please. No, please, miss.
And this has been going on for a long time. And it's difficult for everybody. It's difficult for this board, it's difficult for me, it's difficult for the selectmen, it's difficult for the abutters, for the Oldfields, and for the courts to try and sort this out under the old special permits and the existing bylaws. The old special permit, which originally originated in 1967. Conditions were much different then. I think that the new special permit is as well written as can be for this circumstance, and that very soon they will be in full compliance, and that we will have a new process by which challenges can be worked out. better than what we're doing now. We're beating our heads against the wall, running around in circles. The time and effort on the part of all parties, the town, the Johanning and Rowe property, Matt Dunn, the old fields, is just, is mind-boggling. I have 20,000 files on properties in Milton. Thayer Nursery is by far the biggest file, and not just in a small way. It's huge compared to all of the others. And so, to sum it up, part of my reason for issuing this, while at the same time we were pursuing some contempt charges against Thayer Nursery, and we came to some agreement on that as to the payment of a fine, in the hopes that Thayer Nursery gets the message that we're looking for strict compliance, and they need to follow their special permits. And I believe we made some progress in that yesterday. So that's the reason, whether Mr. Johanning agrees or disagrees, or Oldfields agree or disagree, that's the reasoning for my, at this point, issuing temporary occupancy permit. I believe I was given the right at the last hearing to do that by this board, and that's the direction I follow. That's all I got.
Could I ask you a couple of
Certainly.
very specific questions?
Yes.
I'm looking at the Seabrook Engineering letter. It's May 22nd, 2017.
Okay. I don't have, I have May 2nd.
And if you see the second bullet point, Mr. Prondak?
Yep, the earthen.
Okay, it's talking about the earth berm. It says it wasn't installed,
Okay.
but the berm that was installed was bark mulch.
Okay.
Now, do you know, is the berm bark mulch?
I believe it is partly. I believe there may be some underlying other material. I think,
Eagle Brook says that's going to wash away.
but
It's going to be blown away.
right, I know, and it hasn't been yet.
No, but the question is not whether the berm has failed. Has the berm been installed according to the specification?
The specification.
Was it earth berm permitted?
Earthen berm, so I think that bark mulch,
Is
compost,
Is bark mulch an earthen berm?
I think it's an earthen material, absolutely. I don't think it was, and this is an issue across the board with all of our special permits. Some of the language is unclear, so I think bark mulch certainly could be considered an earthen berm. And I think over time it does deteriorate and become permanent.
Do you know in the third bullet point, their field survey, the Eagle Brook Field Survey, says the berm is not 18 inches above the swale elevation. The survey indicates that the berm is 13 to 14 inches. Is that true, or is
I
that...
believe there are parts of it that may be 13 to 14 inches. I don't think it's the entire berm. And I have a contradicting statement in the DeSalle Burke.
Yes, but the DeSalle Burke is March? Is that a
March.
March report?
Yes,
So it's
and the
couple-
berm's been in since then.
It has
And-
been.
And I think even in the May 2nd letter, Eagle Brook makes the same statement.
Okay. The fourth bullet point is talking about a gate. And it says the bottom of the gate needs to be raised 12 inches to prevent backwater and ponding of stormwater in front of Mr. Johanning and Mr. Rowe's property.
Okay,
Does that, in your opinion?
I've seen the gate, I've seen the water flow through that area. I'm not sure I agree with that. Again, I'm just seeing this for the first time. I
Okay,
know
so
that
does the specification require the gate to be sufficiently
it's silent,
silent?
yes.
So, how about the existing fence off the Tevens property? It says it's not located 15 feet. It's 9 feet to 9.7 feet.
Right. and
Is that
again,
true?
Well, the DeSalle engineering report contradicts that specifically. And they say,
Okay, one of the more important issues, to me at least, is the basin. and you say the basin has been completed.
Completed.
They say it hasn't been installed, they being Eaglebrook or Mr. Giuliano, it hasn't been installed because the inlet pipe is not located at the bottom of the pond. Is that true?
That I don't know.
Well, but the town engineer looked at the basin and said it was installed.
He said that
It had been completed.
correct.
But he didn't say it
He
had been
didn't-
completed
he didn't
according to the
specifically-
specification?
I'm not sure that what Eaglebrook is stating is really correct in their assumption that,
I don't know either.
yeah. But again, all of these, it appears that the drainage is working. If there are some discrepancies within locations of pipe, heights of berms, all of those can be corrected, and when we get...
Don't we have to know what the
Right, and that's why
discrepancies are?
we need to get an as-built on all of those, and we want to wait
But
till...
we have no date for that.
Right, but
And
we want to
Thayer
make...
wants to operate,
Yes,
and Mr. Johanning wants his property rights protected and observed.
correct, and I believe we're doing both. That's
Well,
my
But
opinion.
if we wanted to, we're not, the Board of Appeals isn't competent to go out and start looking at the detention or the gate or
Right.
where the pipe is and
Right,
all of
and
that.
but I think we also have to look at, is the drainage system working? And I believe the answer is yes. And our town engineer has looked at that part of it, that tie-in to the...
He looked at the tie-in, but did he go on to Mr. Johanning's property?
I can't
to
speak,
conduct
I can't speak.
A
as to
study?
that.
Did he ask Mr. Johanning whether he's had flooded out?
I'm sure he did not. I'm sure he did not. I don't think he's been charged with that.
So, Can I ask you this? I know times are tight,
Mm-hmm.
and you're overburdened, and everyone has their job to do,
Mm-hmm.
and not to act as consulting engineers for the Board of Appeals or anyone else. I guess we did have an override that passed. That doesn't make any sense at all for the town to appoint some independent engineer to take the Eaglebrook report, to take what the Sellenberg say, and go out and look at the property and say, wherein is the truth?
Well, in the end of the Eaglebrook report, that's what he suggests. He suggests that a third party come in. And I think that...
Does that make sense, or does it not make sense?
It makes sense, and I
'Cause
think...
how can we decide?
Right, I
based upon
think
these-
maybe as a part of this hearing, the board could or may want to require that. I think it possibly should be required of, say, a nursery, not necessarily the town.
Well, I don't know if we can talk to my colleagues about that. I don't know what that type of inspection would cost.
Right.
Certainly, Mr. Johanning shouldn't have to pay for
I
that. He's-
agreed. And this is a permit for Thayer Nursery, and often consulting engineers, the burden of that is put on the developer, the beneficiary of any type of special permit.
Let me ask you this, from your experience, Mr. Prondak, if the receipt of as-built plans
Yes.
is as important a condition as Mr. Dunn suggests that it is, and you wanted to expedite the issuance of as-built plans, let's say after a potential independent inspection, okay? Do you have an idea, based upon your training background and experience, as to what reasonable time frame an engineering firm could deliver as-built plans under these circumstances?
I think reasonably now, given today's market and how everybody is so busy, I think about 6 weeks. I think if you hired an independent firm, they would tell you, okay, we'll be out in about 3 weeks. And then once they come out,
Right, but
they would tell you it'll be about 3
Yeah,
weeks.
but help me with this, because I think the as-built plans aren't supposed to be prepared by any independent person. Aren't they supposed to be prepared by Thayer Nursery's engineer?
That's what I was-
Who's going to say, here's what was built in the
Right,
field?
that's what I
Admit that.
am requiring, but my understanding was, it was brought up, should there be also an independent engineer, as was recommended by you?
Well, if it's going to take 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, I mean, DeSelle and Burke are very successful engineers, and,
I think they could do it quicker.
well, maybe
because
they could,
here-
I don't know, but did they tell you how long it would take them to
I think they,
produce as-built plans?
I think they did.
I don't want to put you in the middle. Don't guess at it unless you're sure of what they said.
DeSalle Burke will provide a two-man field crew to as-built the entire property once the outlet control structure is complete. It is our opinion that the work completed to date is in conformance with the approved plans. Additional work needs to be done as outlined in this letter to be in compliance. So they said they can do it pretty much right away once the control structure is complete. But I'm saying I want to get the rest of the issues in so that they can do the whole site, not just the drainage and the landscaping, or not just the drainage and the fence. I want the drainage, the fence, the bins, all of it.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have any further questions. I'm sorry I took so much of your time. Mr. Mullen, did you have any questions of Mr. Prondak? Mr. Deba? No. Okay. Thank you very much, Joe. You can stay right there if you'd like.
Yeah.
Always like to have you handy. Before we get to the public, there may not be a lot of the public out there. Mrs. McGetrick, do you want to be heard, or do you prefer to? Great.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Board of Appeals.
Well, thank you very much. As you know, I've been involved with this case only since October, and my focus has been on working with Thayer Nursery, the building inspector, their engineer, in order to bring them to completion of the conditions of their permit, which is the work that had to be done on the site, and in order to allow them to return to their landscaping business and be able to use the site. We had a Board of Appeals hearing about that. You remanded that case back to the building inspector so that we could apply for an occupancy permit, and the process of completing work so as to be eligible to receive either a temporary or final occupancy permit has been what my attention's been focused on since that time. I just want to address a few points that have been raised. First of all, DeSalle Burke has been back on this site since March. And their task has been to review the drainage work, first of all, because the building inspector has been asking for that, or was asking for that, as of December. There were financial reasons why DeSalle Burke did not get back on the site until March. Thayer Nursery has unpaid bills. DeSalle Burke we had to negotiate with DeSalle Burke. They were more than willing to come back. They want to complete their job, and they are doing it. But I want you to understand that some of the delay has been caused by financial stress. The nursery is certainly under a lot of financial stress because of all this, as is the town and everybody else. I mean, it's cost a lot of money.
Well, it's been a lousy spring.
Right.
So
So
maybe
what
that's
DeSalle Burke
helped
agreed
too.
to do was to come in and do an initial site review, and that's what the letter from March 30th is. They are now back and have been visiting the site, and they are preparing to do as-built plans, first for the drainage, and then for the remaining work on the site. This does take some time. I know they've been there twice in the recent past. And although it's not part of this discussion, DeSalle Burke appeared at an arbitration session, gave testimonies, as did the engineer for the neighbors. There was lots of back and forth, testimony of both sides, some disagreements, some of which relate to some of the issues you've been talking about tonight. For example, the composition of the berm, the height of the berm, the location of the fence. These are issues that need to be worked out. There's slight differences that may or may not be determined one way or another, favorably or not favorably. I can tell you that Thayer Nursery will do whatever it's required to do.
When is the arbitrator supposed to render a decision in that matter?
I think in the middle of July. I think the parties have an I just testified at that hearing. I didn't represent the applicants. They had another attorney for that. But I was there for the whole thing. So there's been discussion since some of the letters that you're looking at, or during that time, in more detail on some of these issues. So I just want to say briefly, on the berm composition, there was considerable discussion back and forth about what an earthen berm is. The berm at present has earth in it, and it has mulch in it. It's a combination. It was put in January, and it was created at a much higher height than what was in there originally, because at the site walk in January with the neighbor's engineer, the engineer said he didn't think the berm was high enough. Thayer went back in immediately, this is in January, and built a higher berm. And Thayer has done that each time an issue has come up, when it's, someone has shown them that this needs to be done differently. The berm that's in there is a combination of materials, and we consider it an earthen berm. It has also worked and has been there since January. If at some point somebody determines it's inadequate or not sufficient, Thayer will change the composition. I mean, that's the nature of these requirements. They have to be tested over time. As far as the drainage goes, the big issue with the drainage, other than having an engineer look at the grade of the swale and the retention pond, and whether they were working the way they were supposed to, which is what we needed the engineer for all winter, was the connection with the town. That hadn't been completed. That was required by the permit. It couldn't be done until the street opening was allowed, which after April 15th, and it was done after April 15th. And it was done by a licensed drain layer under the supervision of the town engineer. The connection's been made. There was a new drainage basin that had to be created in the street. It was considerable work, and it was expensive, and it was required by the permit. Thayer has completed that work. The reference to the outlet control structure in the bottom of the basin, I believe, is to the fact that it seemed to be lifting up at the day the review was done, and whatever was at issue has been corrected. When something like that is identified at a site walk, Thayer has corrected whatever was identified. It is now where it is supposed to be. It's secure in the bottom of the basin. It's working the way it's supposed to. And there will be an as-built plan, and that will demonstrate that, and if it doesn't, further correction will be made. I'm going to go back to the engineer's letter, because that mostly what we've talked about is that, and Mr. Prondick has addressed a lot of it. The paved area has been removed as required, and this is an interesting case, because when I read the permit and I looked at the plans, and I looked at what Thayer had done, which was to create 10,000 square feet of growing area in replace of hard-packed earth and pavement, I thought Thayer had complied. That was in December. But when the engineer, Jim Burke, came back on the site in March, he said, no, I think you were also supposed to remove an additional area of pavement. That's what I understood this to mean. And he showed Thayer Nursery where pavement should be removed, and they removed it. So, I mean, these reviews are important, the engineer reviews are important, and Thayer has been responsive whenever an issue has been identified and taken care of it. Again, the earth berm has been installed, it's earthen material, we believe it meets the requirements of the permit, and it's working the way it's supposed to, and it's going to be reviewed as part of the as-built plan. The fence location issue, again, there'll be a final determination and an as-built plan that looks at this. The section along Tevens, initially the fence was installed at 9 feet, there was a tree there. Thayer thought it would be better to do it that way, but that's not where it was supposed to be. It had to be at 15 feet. They installed a second fence, complete second fence behind the first fence. I think the only issue right now is whether the first fence should be removed or not removed. Right now, there are 2 layers of sound-suppressing fence along the Teven property. If the Tevens don't want that, then the first fence, the one that's too close, could be removed. But there's no response as yet from the Tevens as to whether they want it removed. So that's my understanding of what that issue is.
Mrs. Lepore was the one who owned that property. This came to me.
The Tevens isn't that next to Johannesburg?
Correct, yeah. The four is around the corner. That was
Yeah, this is a different side where Lepore is. Okay, hydroseeding, the area's been hydroseeded now, couldn't be before because we weren't in the growing season. And so, just to go back to the whole as-built plan issue, the special permit decision says that there's supposed to be an as-built plan prepared 1 year after the operation under the permit. That's what the special permit says. we're not disputing that the building commissioner has asked for one sooner, nor are we disputing that it may be required under the circumstances. But under the special permit, it's required a year after operation. They just started operation under this permit 3 weeks ago. But the engineer is working on an as-built. We don't have a date of completion, but we'll be continuing to see when that will be. I just want to bring that to the attention of the board. And in terms of what's required by the special permit, it's not required until a year. And what's required not only is an as-built plan, but a review of operations, a review of how the drainage is working, a year in to the operation. And presumably, if there were something wrong and it weren't operating as effectively as it were intended to operate, then there might have to be a change in the drainage system. But a year is allowed in the permit for looking at this issue. As far as okay, so finally, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update, sort of like a daily update. I think the building commissioner addressed the primary issue with the storage containers, which is that the storage containers limitations described in the special permit are designed to limit the amount of material for landscaping that can be stored on site, as well as to contain it in some kind of container. The building commissioner allowed Thayer to use temporary containers beginning in May, plywood, just so that the size of material would be contained, and required that the permanent containers, which are the huge cement blocks, be installed by the 15th. Thayer notified him that they were having difficulty getting delivery. They have to get the blocks from one place. They need a delivery company to deliver them. And these are huge, so you can only do 15 blocks per load. So they still may have one more load to come, I'm not sure. They are constructing the bins. I have a black and white photo showing you the ones that are in place right now. And I'll give it to you in a minute. I think it's back at my seat. And for the remaining section of fence, yes, it's a job that takes several days. They have to order the material. The reason the fence has been left as the last item is because it's along the last part of the property. Actually, the landowner on that site asked if the fence could not be built, but we can't do that. We have to meet the terms of the permit. But it has not been considered to be the most important part of the mitigation, partly for those reasons, and because it's the part that wraps around the edge of the property and goes back out towards Forest Street. But it will be done, and it is scheduled to be done by the 30th. So that's just to address some of the points that are in the Eagle Brook letter. There will be producing an as-built plan with specific measurements, and if there are discrepancies, they'll be resolved. In the separate lawsuit with the neighbors regarding drainage, there are provisions for resolving discrepancies between engineering reports, which include the possibility of bringing in another third-party engineer agreed upon by both parties. I'm not sure that's going to be necessary here, but if it is necessary, there is a way of doing it, and it's addressed in that settlement agreement, which is completely separate from the permit. You're not parties to it, but I do want you to know that that's there, and that's likely to happen if there can't be a resolution. The first step, I think, is to finish the as-built plan from their engineer, DeSalle Burke, who prepared the original plan, and then to see if there is still any discrepancy between what Eagle Brook says and what Thayer says. So it's just something that hasn't happened yet. My purpose,
that's Mr. Johanning's point. It hasn't happened yet.
It
so
can't
how
happen.
can you
It
be
couldn't happen
operating?
until the drainage work was done. That was only completed at the beginning of May. It couldn't be done until after the street opening permit was allowed. I mean, that's just the situation that exists. And it's not because Thayer has been dragging its feet or doesn't want to do this. I mean, Thayer really wants to be operating under this permit. And I mean, as the judge said yesterday in the hearing, all of the old cases relate to pre-new zoning that the town passed. The town passed new zoning, the town issued a special permit, and now Thayer should reach a point where it's operating under the permit, and we will be evaluating their performance based on what's required in the special permit. That's what I've been working with there to try to get them to the point where they could begin to operate under the new special permit. This is, the issue you looked at in December was an occupancy permit. The requirement that there be an occupancy permit, because this is considered a new use from a legal standpoint. And what's the standard for determining when an occupancy permit can be issued? Whether provisional
They hadn't
or
applied
permanent.
for it.
They hadn't applied for it, first of all, so they had to apply for it. And then the question became, what's the standard? Well, the building commissioner in the first instance determines what the requirements will be. And he's explained to you how he evaluated those requirements and how he finally, at the end of May, issued a temporary occupancy permit with conditions, and the conditions have to be met, or Thayer will lose its temporary occupancy permit. It certainly wants to achieve a permanent occupancy permit, and that's the goal. So, that's my report. I don't know if there's anything I've left out. I'll give you the picture that I'm talking about.
Okay, well, let me just, Marion, let me see if my colleagues have any questions of you. Mr. Mullen, do you have any questions of Mrs.
What do you
McGinty?
say to the fact that a number of these conditions haven't been complied with and don't appear to be able to be complied with by the dates that the commissioner has put in here?
Which conditions haven't been complied with?
Well, let's see.
The only one I know of is the fence.
The bins.
The bins are complete. They have bins in.
No, that's not what Mr. Prondak said. Mr. Prondak said the bins weren't important. They were really for the protection of the town.
Well, they
Special
are
per-
in, I'm telling you.
Okay, so this is really a
I have a
problem.
picture of them.
Are they in or aren't they?
Well, they just went in this week. Mr. Prondak isn't there every second.
They are under construction.
Yes.
They are
That's
not
not in.
complete. They are not complete.
There's a picture I have of bins so far. That's a
Right, but they're not,
Okay.
they're not complete
Well,
as per the,
I don't want to replay the hearing,
Right.
but the testimony from the building commissioner was that they were not in.
correct.
Okay. So, are they in?
I'll show you what's in.
No, I don't want to know. I want to know what's in, but I don't know that we can establish what's in. So that's a question. That's one thing that was said. What about the truck?
That's all set, right?
I believe the truck to be in compliance.
The truck it was traded with is taken off. The new truck is in. The new truck's smaller than the old truck.
I have not seen the old truck on the site. And I have looked several times.
What about the installation of the remaining sound attenuation material?
That will be in at the end of June.
The deadline on that is June 30th.
Okay. So the issue that I have, I feel like what's happened here is we authorized and we directed that the issuance of the occupancy permit can happen upon substantial compliance with the requirements of the special permit. And we've got a dueling engineer saying that it's not even close to substantial compliance, is what I read in these engineering letters. And I feel the need for some type of monitor here. Because I think it's completely unfair to the board, first of all, to give us this at 5 o'clock on the day of the hearing.
But we didn't give it to you.
I got this at the hearing.
That's Mr.
All right?
Dunn-
I got
Mr.
an
Dunn's.
8-page legal memo on my way here. We're
agree.
being asked to revoke an occupancy permit, and what we really end up with are dueling engineering reports that require either we go out and make our independent judgment based upon the best we know, or we get some independent monitor for this situation. So that's one point. The second is, I feel like we're amending the special permit, and I don't want to do that. There's a process to amend the special permit. We should not read more things into the special permit than are there. I don't want to say, so the bins, for example. The building commissioner said that the bins were for the benefit of the town. That's not what the special permit says. The petitioner has a letter in that says that the bins are important to him. So I don't know who the bins are important for, but what I know is the planning board required the bins to be in there. It feels to me pretty fundamental to a commercial nursery operation that they be in, and I don't know whether they're in. So I feel like we're being put in a very, the way this process is designed to work is that there are bright lines and deadlines so that things get done. And what's happened, I think, is that conditions are being read into the special permit, permitting things to go on, extending deadlines unreasonably. And now we have a hearing, an important hearing, on an occupancy permit, and we don't have the facts. So I just wanted to get that on the record. Thirdly, I don't think we can rely on DeSalle and Burke. I have a lot of respect for them, too. But they seem to me to be an advocate here. And I feel like we need some independent judgment. And the last is, I'm wondering, on the continuing harm here, I don't think it's been established as to the extent of the conditional. I know there's been a lot of talk about the as-built plan. I'm less concerned about the as-built plan, frankly. I want to know what the condition of the ground is, and whether or not the drainage in particular, or the noise, or the location of the fence, or anything, or the bins, or any of the things that the planning board seems to me to have painstakingly documented in a 27-page permit, are really complied with. I mean, we really need to go paragraph by paragraph at this point, because they're occupying under that permit. And I agree with Mrs. McKettrick's laudable objective to begin to be operating under the permit, but it feels to me like we're a long way from there. And that's what I've gotten under this, out of this 60 or so minutes. Some of those were questions, I know. Some of them were comments, but so
Thank you.
that's the best I can do.
Thank you,
I'm tired.
Mr. Mullen. Mr. David, do you have any questions of Mrs. McKettrick?
No, I think
No.
Mr. Mullen dealt with some of the things I was thinking of, actually.
Okay. Mrs. McKettrick, do you have anything further to add?
Well, I would respectfully disagree that we're far from there. I would say they're very close, really, that I've watched this for months. They are very close. They have done substantial work on this site. We've gone through this permit piece by piece. However, I certainly respect the fact that you don't necessarily have the data in front of you to show you that. There are two issues that were incomplete, the bins and the fence. And they need to be completed. The bins are, I believe, close to completion. The fence we were given a deadline of June 30th, but it's going to be, that's close, first of all. So I would suggest that, if we have the engineer on site, he's been there twice, and he's getting ready to do this, as-built plan. So I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I think that.
Yeah. But this is more than an as-built plan, right? It's just, these letters they're like, it's not the same site.
Right. I mean, that disturbs me, too. I mean, you could say,
Are you really surprised?
yeah, that the engineer's report would vary that differently. Yeah, it's not that common.
No,
I agree with you.
I know, but just look at the history. So let me just have something to say. 12 years ago, I was on a path, and it was a really personal path. And it took many, many months. And it ended up with a cancer diagnosis Christmas Eve. And for the next 5 years, I had the best doctors, and in my path, weaved in and out in 5 years. How long have I been dealing with this? Since 2013? Do you know what path I would choose to do again? The path I went down 12 years ago. This whole town, every single board has screwed up. Every board. And you guys don't know how to solve it. So I don't know what you want me to do.
Comply with the special permit, to comply with the conditions.
The problem is you guys don't tell me
which
which special permit to follow.
You've got a lawyer, you've got one of the best lawyers in Milton. Listen to her and take her advice.
Yeah, well, this whole thing is screwed up, and no one is fixing it. And so even the whole truck thing is a moot point, because that truck is on the new permit, but according to Joe, we're working off the old permit.
Well, not anymore, but.
No, but we were. When you issued
Yeah, that's
that
very confusing.
contempt order, it was because we had an extra truck on our site.
Partly.
No, and we didn't, that was okay. It was okay to have that extra truck because we weren't under the new permit at that point. How much time was wasted on that truck?
Limited you to 5 trucks. You did, so you were restricted under the old
I
permit.
know, Josh could have a truck.
Well,
So it's confusion, it's just confusion, every step of the way, every step of the way. And we're just trying to make it less confused for everyone. And it's not gonna get less confused, because every document that we prove compliance, they're gonna have another document that shows non-compliance. The town brought us to court over 15 minutes. We started a Bobcat 15 minutes early, 7:45 we started. Seriously, in the economic situation that this town is in, how much time are you guys wasting on attorney's fees? I know, you've spent $130,000 on attorney's fees just for Thayer Nursery, And 95 was spent on Coulter. And what is Coulter doing? They're selling. What a complete waste of money that is.
Well, you may have a nice social commentary, Mrs.
Mrs. Lang
Yeah.
or Miss
Thank you.
Oldfield.
But I think we're trying to deal with the specific issues here. But I think I understand what you're saying, and I thank you for your
Well,
testimony.
we've listened years and years and years. I have kept my cool all this time, and I'm done keeping my cool. I'm done.
You can say anything you want, but just be careful what you say and make sure it's truthful and make sure it conforms to the evidence. And if you
The
want-
permit
if you-
says we can build up to 9 bins. We have 4 bins
They're
built
not
today.
They're not built. Let's be honest, yeah.
We
They're
don't need
not
to build, we
built.
don't need to build bin. It's built up to 9.
You
We can
don't-
build
you don't
up
have
to
three-
9.
You don't have 3 buildings.
Yes,
We
built.
do, we
Mr.
do.
Prondak says they're not. Do we believe you, or do we believe Mr.
Well,
Prondak?
we can show you a picture. 4 are built.
I think perhaps, let us move on, if you don't mind. It's just going to get very contentious and very personal, and I don't think you're helping your case. But that's just my opinion. If you want to slander the town, you want to slander the town officials, you want to slander the Board of Appeals, you want to slander the planning board, you want to slander everybody, if that's your tactic, then you can do it. I can't stop you from doing it. But some people may think that you're not being totally candid in your remarks. Unfortunately, I see how emotionally involved you are. I can't say that I wouldn't be equally as involved. But I think what we're trying to do, as Mrs. McGetrick is trying to do, is to get you to a position where everyone can come to some type of common agreement that makes sense for everybody's rights. Mr. Joe Henning said he didn't want to have any greater rights than you, but he didn't want you to have greater rights than he. And we come here, as Mr. Mullen said, and I tried to bring out in my questioning, with a series of issues that the board isn't able to make decisions on because we have the competing engineers. One says one thing, the other says the other. And it's not fair to Mr. Joe Henning that we should be making decisions based upon what DeSalle and Burke, your engineers, say, and whether they think you're in compliance. They can express the opinion that they think you're in compliance, and we can consider that, but that's not the type of independence that we're looking for. And you can say the same thing for Mr. Dunn and his clients. I don't know the engineers, is it Weatherbrook or Meadowbrook? Eaglebrook. They're engineers, they're licensed engineers, Mr. Giuliano. What we need to do to get to the facts, and my concern here is that forgetting the standard of review, we're not able to make a decision on the facts because we have the competing battle of experts. So we'll get into the remedy, but do you have anything else you'd like to add, Mrs. Lang?
No.
Okay, thank you. Let me just ask, is there any other person present this evening who wants to be heard, who hasn't had the opportunity to be heard? Okay, thank you. There's no such person. So I guess we've had, at this hearing, we've had the evidence portion of the hearing. And let's see where we go with it. I normally don't speak first. I like to hear from my colleagues, because running these hearings, you get to, I don't want anyone to think I'm shaping the hearing. But I think I'm going to speak first here, because I really think we have several issues. I don't think we can determine either issue. Mr. Dunn talks about strict compliance and has a memo that sets forth all of his positions on that. Mr. Brundak was talking about substantial compliance. I don't think there's a big deal of a difference between substantial compliance and strict compliance. I think I read earlier one definition. I think it's fairly close. Substantial performance is the fulfillment of the obligations agreed to in a contract with only slight variances from the exact terms and/or unimportant omissions or minor defects. So that's what I'd like to have answered. Are there slight variances or slight differences on minor issues? And on the evidence that's been presented, I can't make that determination. And I think that there are serious issues that we need to have answered. And some of them, I think, as Mr. Mullen says, and I hope he'll address these issues a little bit more than I'm going to, relate to the effect on the subject property, Mr. Joe Henning and Mr. Rowe's property. And to me, I understand why the as-built plans, it's a nice wrap-up for everything. But I honestly don't think that the mere fact that there aren't as-built plans, but they're in the process of being prepared, is really directly involved here. I want to look at the issues that directly involve Mr. Joe Henning and Mr. Rowe's property. And to me, that means the berm. Is the berm as specified? Is the berm that's there, is it going to be adequate? Or in 2 weeks, we're going to have Mr. Joe Henning's property flooded out? I think that's a critical issue, and we can't decide that issue. Number two, the detention basin. I can remember a lot of talk about the detention basin at the last hearing, and one of the issues was having the pipe at the bottom of that detention basin. I'm not an engineer, but I know that was a significant thing. We have the town engineer who's gone out and says that, well, there's a detention basin there, but he can't say where the pipe is. He didn't conduct a detailed study as to how the detention basin was going to be constructed. That's an important issue that needs to be decided. And so I think really and if we can get something about as-built plans, that's great. But I think the important thing is, should Thayer Nursery be operating with the issues that we have outstanding here, which I think can be cured if the berm was found to be not in keeping with good engineering practice. If an engineer said the berm should be made of X, it could go out and be made to comply in a very short period of time. The detention basin may be another issue. I don't know how complicated that is. But I think there are substantial issues that need to be decided, and I can't, on this evidence, determine whether there's been substantial compliance or not, or whether there's been strict compliance or not. And I think that has to be determined. And I really, I think that we should really have an independent engineer appointed to do a study, not a 6-week study, not a 2-week study, but to give that engineer specific substantial issues that we can certify or suggest that we want his independent opinion on, and we should be guided by that as to whether this conditional permit should be revoked or not. And unless we have that, I don't think the board has been put in a position to be fair to either party. Putting aside Mr. Dunn's argument that strict compliance means in conformity with every technical requirement set forth in the special permit. So that's my position. Mr. Mullen.
I think if we establish the facts, then we would be able to speak to the standard. but we've kind of reversed it by speaking to the standard before establishing the facts. So it felt to me like the testimony was that it wasn't really about substantial or strict. It was about how far, general compliance with the special permit. That's the first comment. The second comment is, I know that there's a concern about Mr. Joe Henning's property. I'm concerned about limiting the issue to that, because the special permit doesn't do that. There's been testimony here as to the benefit, for example, of the bins. I don't know that. What happened here with the planning board, it spent a tremendous amount of time doing this. It's really detailed work, and they devoted a lot of time to stating what their intent was, and I want to read it so that the record will reflect it. It's the intent of the planning board that the combined nursery and landscaping business operation, landscaping business operation, under the terms and conditions herein specified, will result in an overall improvement to the conditions of the premises. Of the conditions at the premises. The board intends that there will be less dust, odor, and noise than those that would result under nursery operations alone, without the various new measures herein specified being taken. The board therefore defines that the landscaping business use, subject to the appropriate terms and conditions, will not cause substantial detriment to the neighborhood. It doesn't list these conditions and which entity, what part of the neighborhood are going to be benefited, and I don't think we can do that. I think we need to know how much of this special permit is being, how many of the conditions are in place and how many aren't. I really do, especially now that the temporary CO is out there. And I feel like, my only point to your point, John, Mr. Chairman, is that I don't think it's our job to determine which of these conditions benefit one particular property. It's really the totality of the special permit that needs to be taken into consideration. It may, at the end of the day, boil down to the 2 or 3 things that we're concerned about, but there's issues with lighting in here, for example, that we haven't talked about at all, and I, for one, would be very interested. Just do a page turn. How are we doing? And I'd like to get some indication on that.
We could have provided such a report, but that's what you want us to do. But my question is, how much of this is by an independent engineer, and how much is just information that you want in front of you that you don't have right now?
It's interesting. It's a good question. I agree with Ted. It's not been my experience that the engineering reports are as disparate as we've seen here. They really do read like they're separate properties. So ordinarily, I would say it doesn't really have to be independent, but maybe in this case it does. The evidence tonight would indicate that we'd be foolish to not really try to get that if we could. I understand there's cost to it, but they're really the engineers have taken the opposite position. That really hasn't been my experience in the past.
If I might be allowed to just make one comment, you do not have a current report from DeSelberg, and that's a problem for you, I understand, but you don't even have that.
That's
so
true.
You need to see that. I understand what you're looking for, but I would strongly suggest that we get a report from DeSelberg.
But we're going to be in the same position, Marion. We're going to be in the same position.
It may not be disparate, maybe I just don't know.
Can the engineers talk with one another?
They've always been able to do that. We've invited that.
Well, I do think, but I think it's not going to be effective, to be frank about it. You're going to end up with dueling experts.
Should we have DeSelberg engaged to do an as-built, or are you looking for simply having an independent report?
Right now, I just want to know whether the conditional occupancy permit should continue.
Yeah.
That's all I want to know.
I agree with that, but I do think it calls into question the permit itself, right, John? Because,
yes, it does.
Because in order to get to the point where you're issuing the temporary certificate of occupancy, the building commissioner, who I know is sitting right here, would have had to have found that there was substantial compliance with the entirety of the special permit.
Yes.
So what's happened here is he's made that finding and he's issued the temporary CO subject to a series of specific conditions, but it doesn't vitiate the balance of the special permit.
And in light of the testimony, I think it makes sense to go back and say, okay, where are we on this? As far as the as-built, I actually care less about that. I think it's a nice to have. It's terrific to have. But all that's doing is documenting conditions we know to exist. I think you've got to establish the underlying facts first, and then document them for the record in the form of an as-built drawing. And I didn't find it in the special permit, but I don't doubt that it would be there'd be a one-year requirement. That's fairly typical of something like this, it seems to me, so. In other words, at least the message from me, and I don't know that we should maybe talk about that, I wouldn't order that an as-built drawing be issued in 60 days. I'm much more interested in the satisfaction of the underlying conditions that the planning board has so carefully laid out in the special permit, and particular attention to the ones that the building commissioner was interested in the temporary CO, because that is the subject of the hearing. That's all. I don't mean to make it more complicated, but I think those issues have been called into question.
Well, the question to me is one of cost.
Yes, I agree.
In scope of study. You're right. If you start to look at the special permit generally, and you hire one of these engineering firms that's distinguished in these multi-disciplines, you could end up with a whopping bill when we're really concerned with, and I think Mr. Burke and Mrs. McGettrick have indicated that both parties here are using their good faith, best efforts to try to get to completion. And if that's the case, and they're both terrific lawyers and both honorable people, if that's what they're trying to do, from my perspective, I'd like to see, well, what is the present problem here? What conditions are the people contending are not being complied with, strictly or substantially? And wherein is the truth on those issues? And I understand what you're saying, Jeffrey, and there's a lot of sense to it. But I think it has to be somehow modified so that it stays within the issues being discussed by both engineers, so that it can be something that can be looked at reasonably quickly, reasonably inexpensively, and we can have an objective position that as of the present time, on these issues of contention, here's reality. And if they disagree with Thayer Nursery, that independent engineer, then Mrs. McGettrick is going to say, well, we're going to go out and we're going to fix the berm, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and try to get into compliance again. But I think, I understand, looking at the whole picture, I think is going to be crazily expensive. These engineers are, they're good people, but they're very expensive, and they can investigate things forever, and I think we should be more, as discreet as we can, to try to get something back from somebody that maybe we all can mutually agree upon that is quickly done and that's inexpensively done, and we don't need the study of the century. We just need to know existing conditions and are they in compliance. Mr. Daba, what do you have to say?
No, I don't want to just repeat what you guys have said, but I tend to agree that the focus should really be on the issues that we've been talking about tonight and the ones that have been raised in terms of, other issues could come up in the future, theoretically, if someone realizes that something isn't to be complied with, but right now, those are the issues that are in contention, I think, both among the engineers and among the parties. So I think if we focus on them and we try to get some kind of report that we can rely on as to the status of them, that's why I suggested, I know I've been involved in cases where environmental engineers have discussed to try to work things out where there's been kind of a difference, and it sometimes works out. So that's why I was thinking that maybe if the engineers talked about it, knowing that the parties are all trying to reach the same goal, they could reach some resolution of these issues. For example, on the inlet pipe, the town engineer knew that there was an inlet pipe but didn't know where it was. The I think it was the Eagle Brook engineer, said that the inlet pipe was not at the bottom of the pond. But we didn't have anything to indicate where it was supposed to be, although I guess there was some discussion about, but I'm not sure whether that's required by the special permit or not. So, you know, those are the types of issues that, you know, if there is a difference of opinion between the engineers, and if it's not part of the special permit or part of the drainage plan, you know, how do we come out, how do we come out on that issue as to whether there's compliance or whether that's just a difference of opinion? Some of them could just be a difference of opinion.
Joe, let me ask you this, that if we wanted to deal with discrete issues that have been mentioned here, do you know of any, let's say a consulting engineer, as opposed to a consulting engineering firm with 500 people, do you know of any consulting engineers who are reasonably active, maybe recently retired? Because we're looking for fact-finding here. We're not asking for this engineer to go out and design the drainage system. Do you know of anybody that you'd have confidence in to do a fact-finding mission on these issues?
I really don't. The engineers that I deal with are all ones that have been hired by various developers, contractors. Personally, I don't have any direct dealings. I never have a need to.
How about something like the Quincy building inspector, something like that? Is that possible? You know what I mean?
I don't know that they would be of any...
Just come over, give us an independent look, spend an afternoon on the property, give you a letter. No?
I could ask.
It's a bad idea? I don't know.
I could ask.
I like Ted's idea, but if that's not possible, you know, kind of a municipal courtesy kind of thing.
I'm sure I could possibly work that out.
It might cost you. Reciprocal.
Yeah, something like that. But that's, I can handle that.
I don't know.
If that's reasonably agreeable, maybe.
Are the issues in contention, the issues in the Eagle Brook letter and the conditions that are in the temporary occupancy permit?
Yes.
Would that be a fair way to
Yes.
describe them?
Sounds
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay, I mean, I'm trying to understand clearly what it is that you want. So if those are the issues in contention, then the question becomes how to get another view on where we are on those issues. And the other thing you've mentioned, I'm not sure whether you want this or not, because implied in a temporary occupancy permit is the idea that anything else that isn't listed, the applicants are in compliance. Because otherwise it would be listed as not done. But you're saying that you want us to, you've mentioned at least that maybe you want to know whether all these other things in the permit that are conditions are actually being met. So do you want a list or a review of that nature?
That's the broader issue that
That's my issue, but-
Mr.
Okay.
But
So,
if
I mean,
the-
that's
if it's
possible
true,
to
if the
do.
building commissioner is saying that the balance of the permit has been complied with, and that these are the things that were not complied with, that is the measure of substantial, then I didn't hear that. That was not the testimony, but that would be a very helpful fact.
That is my estimation of the overall picture, yes, and that's why I issued.
Okay?
Let me just hold for 1 second. Mr. Joe Henning, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to mention that landscaping is an additional part that
Do you want to come up?
spoke about.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just to make sure you're recorded.
All right. Phil Joe Henning, 23 Parkwood Drive. Mr. Dunn also mentioned landscaping. Landscaping is very important to us, and it has not been done as specified in the special permit. The reason why it's important to us is that Thayer specified that it would be mountain laurel and rhododendron. If you look at Teven's backyard, their rhododendron are as big as their house. And what's beautiful about rhododendron, they're evergreen and they have large leaves. And what does that do? It blocks noise, it blocks light, and it blocks dust. And so that's really important to us, but mountain laurel and rhododendron have not been planted. Additionally, the special permit says 8 8 evergreen trees, 8 pines, I'll call them pines, and they specify exactly the size, et cetera. 4 have been planted, not 8. And the 8 were supposed to be planted along the Tevens-Johanning Row property line. 4 have been planted behind us, but nothing has been planted behind Tevens. Why? Because the space between the fences is not adequate. So it all ties together in a way, but landscaping is extremely important to us, and we hope to see rhododendron and mountain laurel because of their size and other benefits.
Great, thank you. That's well put. Let me suggest this. Mr. Prondak, why don't you search out, because you're our eyes and ears here, somebody that you would recommend to the board to do this discrete, independent investigation. We will give you a checklist of the issues to be looked at and to see whether to see what the state of those matters are. And then you would then be in a position as the building commissioner of Milton to make a determination as to whether the condition permit, in your opinion, should remain outstanding or not. And that makes sense. And then you're not the judge, jury, and executioner. You have somebody who's independent. That's the only thing I want to urge you to do, is pick somebody or recommend somebody to the board, or recommend 2 people or 3 people to the board, so that we have independence on this investigation. But we want to keep it as discreet and direct and not long reports. Does that make sense?
It does.
Mr. Mullen, do you have anything to say?
Can I ask, Mr. Dunn, Mr. Johanning, if, I know on page 16 of your brief, the bottom there, yeah, paragraph B, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just to Mrs. McKettrick's point, is it accurate to state that the issues that are articulated in the temporary certificate of occupancy and that are the subject of this particular complaint are listed on the bottom of page 16 and the top of page 17? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
6 and 7. That's a slash. That's not one.
Oh, okay, 6 and 7?
6 and 7.
No.
Okay.
So those are issues with regards to fair's compliance with the requirements of the temporary
Right.
occupancy permit.
Right.
Not fair's compliance with the overall special.
I understand. But this hearing is about, you've requested the revocation of the temporary certificate of occupancy, have you not?
Right.
And it's on the basis of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
No. So the grounds are really that there hasn't been compliance with the requirements of the special permit. Overall.
That's number 1.
Yeah, but you haven't introduced any evidence on that. Your evidence has been on rather discrete issues here that we're trying to deal with. Nobody's saying, if we say that we're not going to revoke the conditional occupancy permit, okay? Nothing prevents you from challenging our ruling on that, and nothing further prevents you from saying, when the occupancy permit becomes final, that it shouldn't become final because of these other reasons, blah, blah, whatever they may be.
So maybe I didn't articulate it well enough.
Or maybe we didn't ask you the right question.
So the challenge is really, the challenge to the issuance of the temporary occupancy permit is really 2 parts. Number 1, it shouldn't have been issued in the first place because there hasn't been strict compliance with the requirements of the special permit.
But that's a legal question, so Mr. Prondak's experienced colleagues isn't going to make that decision.
Okay, so,
But he,
right, that's, okay.
That's
right.
our call.
That's right.
but there has been testimony, now there's been testimony that
the building commissioner's listing of these issues are those things that need to be done, otherwise he would have concluded they have strict compliance. This goes to the substantiality, that's what I understood it to be. So for example, the lighting, you believe it to have been complied with, the lighting plans. I mean, that's the way I understand these
So
facts.
here's the way that
coming out.
when we were talking about a temporary occupancy permit, based on this board's decision back in January 4th of 2017, you guys were talking about exactly what you're talking about now, having a list of items that for the requirements of the special permit, and basically Mr. Prondak going through and saying, check, 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 minus, check, and then basically, and this is doing it very roughly, but adding it up at the end of the day, and does there get a 65 or does there get a 95? And if 95 is substantial compliance, then, you know, and that satisfies this board, then they get the occupancy permit. But if they get a 65, well, that's not substantial compliance, and they have to go back to the drawing board. So that's what I was thinking, that the certificate of occupancy there was going to be something, and I didn't see this thing until last Friday, that there was going to be something on that said, you know, here's what this board asked me to do, here it is, and based on this, I think there gets a 90, and therefore I'm issuing an occupancy permit. The stuff that is causing the 10% deduction are the items that are listed here, and I'm giving you their X amount of days to take care of these things in order to become fully compliant and get a permanent occupancy permit. That's the way that, I mean, everyone's talking about this being a confusing process. It really doesn't have to be, because it's a long process, don't get me wrong. But if there wants to operate under the existing special permit, there's a bylaw that allows for that. There's a special permit process that Thayer's already gone through. There's a special permit that's issued to Thayer. There are requirements under that special permit that Thayer needs to comply with in order to get the occupancy permit that it needs to operate. It's really that straightforward. And then now all we need to do is go through the checklist. And did you do this? Do you get a 90 or do you get a 60?
Yeah. You are reading a little bit more detail. We didn't actually require the checklist, but I do think, we didn't say.
No, right.
What you're describing is something along the lines of what I'm imagining the building commissioner goes through in reaching these conclusions. That's what I'm gathering from this conversation.
Yeah.
And the things that he listed, when they're complied with, the CO will be turned into a permanent. Okay.
Who's going to prepare that checklist?
Assuming that's an internal activity done by the building commissioner. That's what I'm hearing. I mean,
I mean, that's essentially what I did, although I didn't put it in writing as clear as Matt Dunn would have liked to see it.
Right.
Fair enough. But it's accurate. That's what he described was the kind of conversation that was at least thinking about. And, you know, the permit is extremely detailed, and you've got to have that kind of discipline, I think, to reach any conclusions, it seems to me. But we are down, so you got it is 1 through 5, plus the landscaping concern.
That are at issue with regards to the existing.
The one is all encompassing.
The temporary conditional permit.
I don't mean to dance around this.
No, it's okay.
I just want to make sure that I understand what's being asked. So there's this one part of our argument here that says that this assessment should have been done, that it wasn't done, and that, all right, so.
That's number one, though. I mean.
Then with regards to the existing temporary occupancy permit, we're saying that even that, there shouldn't be allowed to operate under that permit because it hasn't complied with the requirements of what's Mr. Prondak listed in that document.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
But who's going to determine those factors? Are we going to ask Mr. Prondak to put together a list of factors that are in these documents that, upon which, if there is a finding of reasonable completion, substantial, whatever it is, then the occupancy permit would stand?
Yeah.
But is Mr. Prondak going to do that, or are we going to do it, or who's going to do it?
You and I and Chad, I'm going to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know we were talking about independent, I thought you were gonna give him a charge to find somebody.
I did.
reasonably independent.
I did.
I just wanted to get the scope of what that was about, and it was coming down to the items that are in here, plus the landscaping, is what I'm hearing, recognizing that the petitioner continues to have an outstanding issue about general compliance with the balance of the terms of the special permit.
Right, and no matter how we rule on...
Cut to the chase.
That's right, that's exactly right. Do you understand that, Joe?
I do.
Yeah, and that's still out there.
Okay.
And, you'll want to, the board could ask you, again, when we're back here, are you comfortable that each of these provisions has been complied with, including some things that haven't been mentioned because we just haven't gotten to them, it's so detailed? Okay.
So are you comfortable, Mr. Prondak, of putting together a list based upon your conditional special permit and these letters as to the outstanding issues for the conditional special permit? Circulate that with the board. We'll approve the list. And then we'd like you to recommend 2 or 3 either engineers or building inspectors that you believe would be qualified to do an inspection and a brief review to find whether there is compliance with the conditional special permit.
I do believe I understand what you're asking, and I do believe I can, I don't want to guarantee 100%, but yes, I will give it my best effort.
Okay, and then we'll pick one of them.
Yeah.
And try to, I think what we're looking for here is somebody who can do this within a finite period of time. What is that? 2 weeks? 2 weeks once selected? I mean, we're not looking for a fancy report, we're looking for a letter
So
report.
this is a fact finding.
Yes.
This is something that ought to be able to be determined by an experienced person with a walk down of the site. And maybe both engineers could be present, something like that. I mean, we could design something where you could have yourself, the third party, both engineers, the people from the Thayer Nursery, yourselves. My concern is, I don't want to go through this process and then be back here saying that it's been unfair. And we could run the risk of doing that if everybody isn't involved,
That's fine.
So I'd want something like that.
That's fine, but people have to understand that type of meeting, and we've conducted that at Thayer Nursery and at Mr. Johanning's house. It's not a free-for-all or a debate as to which engineering firm is right or wrong. It's like going on a jury view, where people's comments are restricted. So it's not an open debate in front of a third party that Mr. Prondak has selected and the board has approved. It is, this is the berm. How high is that berm? What is that berm made out of? That type of thing. In other words, this is not a hearing at Thayer Nursery of Mr. Johanning's property. It's just going to, the engineers can be there and they can suggest something that is bark and something else, or but it's not there's not going to be, we're not going to be there. We're not going to have a reporter there to take down what's being said, and we don't want a big debate and a fight over these conditions.
I have a thought. What if I were to sit down in this room with the 2 engineers and discuss these issues with them, then set forth the findings from that to an independent?
That's fine with me. Anything that
Might be better than-
that can focus the issues, to get it done quickly and get it done inexpensively, so that people aren't spending a fortune making engineers rich.
The board would like is some indication of what's the condition of the property now so that we can decide this case.
Right.
And we've got some dated material and a lot of, a wide disparity as to the facts.
Right, but maybe-
Some of which might be explained by dates.
Right, and maybe if I had the 2 engineers in the room, we could we could eliminate some of the discrepancies right off the bat.
I'm sure you
That's
would.
fine with me. Mr. Dunn wants to be heard.
So this specific issue with regards to sort of dueling engineers and who has the final say was something that was a subject of this negotiated settlement. And, you know, I can speak for Mr. Joanna, obviously I can't speak for Thayer. But it would sort of make sense to me that since there is an underlying dispute, there's a dispute on this very topic in the civil case that's we're going to have to implement this provision in the settlement agreement that talks about these two, because the two engineers actually, they disagree, but they get along. And so there's a provision in there that talks about them selecting a third-party engineer and then the allocation of costs based on, you know, who winds up being right. I don't know if that's something that this board would like to consider. I'm happy to forward the language that we've already agreed to with Thayer in that agreement, but it just seems like that's exactly where we're heading with this, right?
To me, that makes consummate sense. Yeah. Jeffrey?
Fine.
Ted?
So I can do that, you know, first thing tomorrow. I can
That's
send
what
it to-
That'd be-
That's always, obviously.
That makes sense. Well, you'll talk with Mrs. McGettrick. Can you speak to that, Mary, now, or do you want to just reserve your thoughts? Nobody's intending to put you into a...
Well, that mechanism is in the settlement agreement, which I didn't negotiate and which I'm not involved with. I told you, I testified, I didn't participate. It costs money. Both parties may cost money. It may cost both parties money. It may cost one party money, depending on what the arbitrator finds. It may or may not happen as part of that process. So what I thought you were leaning towards was that's a separate process. It's taking place. If there's going to be an independent engineering evaluation, then that information, I think, should be available to this board because it's going to be created. And if it is, then that's an independent evaluation of a number of issues. I think the process you're talking about right now makes good sense because I think it's going to narrow down some of the issues in contention. I'd like to think it would eliminate them, but I don't know if it will. It's a short process. You get a list, the building commissioner creates a comprehensive list of the terms in the permit and how he sees there as complying or not complying with those terms. So we've done that. I've gone through that many times. I haven't done it with the building commissioner. I presume he's done it because that's what he would have to do in order to issue this temporary occupancy permit. You bring in an independent person then to look at those areas where there appears to be contention because you've heard about that tonight, and you see where you are at that point. You might need an engineer at that point.
I agree with you because...
The intermediate step, I think he should have the meeting with the two engineers.
Well,
Yes, and I like
do.
that idea.
do.
I mean, I'm sorry, I thought that was a great idea.
But I think you're right, Mrs. McGettrick, because I think we don't want to start to be invading the arbitration process that's out there, and it's separate and distinct from us, and all of a sudden, the town engineer is now involved in the arbitration because he's making findings. We should keep the discrete process that we originally discussed. I think that's the cleanest way of doing it.
I think
And
that's
it's a less
scheduled for
expensive way of doing
mid-July.
it.
I mean, this is, I don't know exactly, Mr. Dunn can address that more, but I think they have to produce some kind of memo, and then there's going to be a final hearing, and then there'll be a decision. So then we'll know whether that's going to go to that or not, I suppose. Anyway, that's
So-
my 2 cents. Thank you.
Joe, you're going to meet with the engineers,
I think that's wise.
Yeah.
put together a checklist.
I think that's the
Give us the
first
names
step.
of 2 or 3 people, we'll pick
Schedule
one.
another hearing.
And after the finding is in, and we'll see if that engineer can turn something around in what, 10 days, 2 weeks, or something like that? I don't know
I would think 2 weeks.
what's doable. Something like 2 weeks, okay?
So we're going to schedule a continuation date? Is that right?
Well, that's the issue. Should we do a continuation date, or should we wait until we find out what the parameters are? I think we probably should schedule a date and just continue it if need be.
Don't you have to do that?
I think we
Don't you have
may have to
Publish it
procedurally.
and maybe announce a date?
I think you want a date to keep this thing moving.
You
think
can,
you do,
you
too.
can continue it if you're not ready.
Date's going to be a deadline to hear back.
Right, but you're going to have to
Put
be,
pressure on the building commissioner.
you're going to have to be out 3 weeks, aren't you, minimum? Is that fine? I mean, if the engineer,
What's going to happen?
What you want to do is you want to have the list developed, you want to have the meeting, and you want to have, you want to have the independent person have a look, say, and come back here with the facts. That would be our goal.
Right, I understand that. So the process of this is, I just want to make sure I'm on the same page here. That, Mr. Pronak's going to make a list of the requirements of the special permit, run it by the board. He's going to present the board with 3 proposed individuals that will basically take the list and walk through the fair site.
yes.
And that individual is going to return his findings to the board.
Yes, hopefully within 2 weeks after being appointed.
There's going to be an engineers meeting.
That was the issue.
Yeah, I think that has to be the first step, though, to help narrow this down. I would like to meet with both the Southbrook and Eaglebrook. Rather than on the site, as suggested, I think we just meet here in this room, here's your 2 reports. And I don't think the Southbrook report is March 31st. The Eaglebrook report is May 22nd. They're both outdated, possibly at this point.
If you want to attend that hearing, and Mrs. McGettrick, if you want to attend the hearing of the engineers, you're certainly free to do so. If you choose not to do so, that's fine too.
Okay, I guess I agree with this. I agree that the 200, because you understand, we were just out there. And so the areas of disagreement, and I know that, I understand the board's concern, but it's a lengthy permit. I think that the engineers can limit the scope of what is in dispute.
Good.
And assisting Mr. Prondak come up with this checklist, so I think it is a good idea that
Okay.
we go on the phone or in person.
So what we need to do is pick a continuation date. And I guess the question is 3 weeks too short? Are we just pushing ourselves, or do we just go out 30 days and do our best?
So my question is, what happens to the temporary occupancy permit during that interim period?
Well, that's the issue. We have I think, no basis to revoke it. So you want the shortest period of time, with my suggestion.
But you don't have a reason to keep it in place either. You don't know.
Well, we don't know. That's the point. That's the whole point. We don't have the facts.
Yeah, but why leave it in place?
Because how is it fair to revoke an occupancy permit that's been issued in good faith by Mr. Prondak, and we have no basis to make findings that it's invalid. That's why we want to keep this as short as we can. It's just, I don't think there's any basis. If there's no basis for us to make a finding on these specific issues, I don't know how we can revoke what Mr. Prondak has done. What we're trying to do is expedite the process so that we can make that determination. So if you prefer 3 weeks, we'll do 3 weeks, and if we have to continue it another week or another 10 days, that's fine. Or would you just prefer to go out a month and see where it is? What do we have, Mary? What do you have in your book?
We already have a hearing on the 12th,
What's the 12th?
the Board of Appeals hearing, for a different.
12th of July?
Yes.
It's almost 3 weeks, the 12th.
That's about 3 weeks. I don't know if you want to go out to the next week.
What do we have
after.
on the 12th? Do you remember? One or two matters?
3.
3 matters, okay, we can't do any more.
18th, 19th, or 20th, do you want to go out the next week, or do you want to do?
Well, do you have your docket with you, Mr. Dunn?
I don't know if you want to do the 12th and then the 13th.
No, I don't want to do that.
Okay. So the 18th, 19th, or 20th?
Then I'll need counsel if I do
18th,
that.
19th, or 20th?
Okay, we're talking July.
Correct.
Okay, that's Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Mr. Dunn, how are you? 18, 19, or 20? Mrs. McGettrick, do you know your schedule?
I do. I think those are okay for me. Yep, any of those.
What's preferable to you?
20th.
20th, that's Thursday. Okay. We'll do it. How are you, Mr. Mullen? You fine?
Yeah, so 7:30?
Okay.
I'm okay.
And we do that right in here, in this room.
Okay, so, Mr. Prondak, you'll keep in touch with us and keep us in the loop? In the meantime, we're going to continue this hearing until Thursday, the 20th of July, at 7:30, right in this room.
That's going to be here before you know it. July 4th's in the middle of that. Okay.
Is that what the understanding of the board, the hope anyways, that the procedure that we just talked about
It's all done.
will be complete?
Absolutely.
Will be complete, and we can take that as evidence and decide what to do.
2 of those 3
And not
weeks
to
of July
not to
4th.
relitigate all of these issues again.
Okay.
This is a decision-making hearing based upon that evidence. Okay? Okay, thank you, we're adjourned. Sorry to keep you so late. Thank you for staying.